In the Republic of South Korea, a recovery operation is underway with the objective of destroying the communications tower. Inside the tower, a scene of massive destruction unfolds, with countless people lying injured on the floor. Among them sits an individual who is badly injured and coughing up blood, hardly able to breathe. The individual calls out to another person standing in front of him. Hearing his voice, the person inquires if he is okay and turns to see him in a critical state. Smiling, the injured person remarks that they should be dead by that time, stating that he is in so much pain but has still not succumbed. In response, the other person takes out an ear pod from his ears and fixes it to the ear of the injured person, making him feel much better. Addressing him as Hae-Yun-sung, the injured person asks if he will not get bored being alone after his death, as he will have no one to discuss his favorite idol group with. After staying silent for a while, Hae-Yun-sung agrees, while the other person keeps listening to the song, commenting that he feels like he is listening to it in heaven. In response, Hae-Yun-sung tells him to keep enjoying as much as he wants, saying that after going to heaven, he will surely meet all the idol groups there. Saying that he does not have to care about idols after his death, the person turns to Hae-Yun-sung, telling him to survive and live life on his behalf. Surprised, Hae-Yun-sung turns to him and finds him lying dead on the ground. After gazing at his lifeless body for a few moments, Hae-Yun-sung begins to walk away. Meanwhile, in another part of the tower, several people stand holding guns in their hands, directed towards a monstrous creature entering the room. However, to their surprise, the bullets have no impact on the steel body of the creature, who keeps stepping towards them. Seeing that their weapons are ineffective, they begin to contemplate what to do. Meanwhile, the monster, with a single strike, blows all the attackers away, cutting their bodies into pieces and inflicting immense pain. Watching that heinous scene, the remaining team members start contacting Hae-Yun-sung, their leader, to inform them about the situation while the monster continues its havoc. Just then, Hae-Yun-sung enters the room from behind and loudly tells the monster to stop. With that, he runs towards the monster, holding his weapon, and leaps up to launch an attack. However, before he can strike, the monster quickly turns towards him and attacks him with its sword, injuring his face. Enraged, Hae-Yun-sung uses his weapon to strike the monster's arm, causing it immense agony and making it lose its arm. Enraged by this attack, the monster turns to him once again and strikes him with full force, causing his team members to worry for his well-being. However, to their surprise, Hae-Yun-sung stands unscathed in front of the dead monster, stating that the battle is over. With that, he starts to walk away, telling his team members to immediately install the bomb and set the timer for 3 minutes, and they comply. Just then, one of the team members calls out to him, informing him that the portal wrap is initiating, indicating the attempts of another worlder to escape. Hearing that, Hae-Yun-sung tells his team members to leave the other bombs and quickly get out of the tower, surprising them. Turning to them, he urges them to hurry. Meanwhile, an alien-like creature sits in a control room, attempting to teleport quickly. Just then, Hae-Yun-sung enters the room and asks if he is trying to escape to its headquarters and inquires if the device he is using is a teleportation device. Holding a few bombs in his hands, Hae-Yun-sung smiles and asks if he is right about that. In response, the alien starts to laugh hard, remarking that Hae-Yun-sung is an inferior human and stating that no matter how hard they try, the planet will be theirs. Hae-Yun-sung, in response, unleashes his sword and slashes it towards the alien, asking if they are not tired of saying the same thing again and again for over 10 years. However, instead of striking the alien, the sword hits an invisible wall between Hae-Yun-sung and the alien, causing the alien to laugh again. Confident, the alien states that such a weak weapon would not be able to pierce through that wall. Yet Hae-Yun-sung keeps striking the wall until a crack forms in it. Shocked, the alien gazes at the cracked wall while Hae-Yun-sung starts to mock him for being overconfident. Holding the weapon tightly, Hae-Yun-sung gets ready to strike the wall but stops to tell a story to the alien. He reveals that about 3 years ago, he captured an alien of his kind who was riding a live weapon and mass murdering humans. After getting defeated, the alien begged him for his life, which made him realize that they were going to win. He strikes the wall once again with all his might, causing it to shatter. Breaking the wall, Hae-Yun-sung steps towards the alien, who watches him with a shocked expression. Reaching near the alien, Hae-Yun-sung launches a strike on its hand. At that very moment, the warp portal is initiated, and Hyun-sung reaches behind the alien, who keeps screaming in agony because of his lost hand. Holding the alien by his neck, Hyun-sung enters the portal along with him to reach the headquarters. With that, both of them start to get teleported to the headquarters while the 3 minutes of the bomb's timer finish, causing massive blasts to erupt from different parts of the tower. Watching this, the members of Hyun-sung's group stand surprised, wondering what might have happened to him. Meanwhile, Hyun-sung, in the middle of the teleportation process, starts experiencing a strange feeling, just like the alien did. Suddenly, both his and the alien's bodies start to disappear, and he closes his eyes. After some time, he regains consciousness and finds himself in a room, wondering if it is the ally camp or if he has been captured. Thinking that his limbs are fine, he removes the blanket from his body, revealing his extravagant clothes. Wondering if he is okay, he looks around the luxurious room, trying to figure out where he is. Afterwards, he gets down from the bed to check it out himself and looks outside the window, finding the scenery to be unfamiliar. He also finds his body to be very heavy, wondering how long he has been unconscious, and decides to check out the state of his body first. Just then, he comes across a mirror and looks at his reflection, feeling shocked. In the mirror, he sees the reflection of a person with a completely different face and personality than his own, leading him to wonder what exactly is happening. The place where he has been transported is a huge palace located in the middle of a beautiful territory. Realizing that this is not his own body, Hyun-sung wonders what has happened. He thinks that the other worlders might have done something with his body. Looking at the interior of the room, he realizes that he is in a castle from medieval Europe and wonders if it is a hallucination or virtual reality. He then walks towards a window and looks out of it, finding a soldier wearing heavy armor standing in front of the window. Amazed, he looks at numerous soldiers who are also wearing the same heavy armor. Just then, he realizes that his clothes are not ordinary either but are made of silk, which proves him to be much more than a noble. He wonders what kind of trick it is, but is confident that he will not be taken down by it. Thinking that, he goes towards a wall where unique weapons and shields are set up. Finding them to be great, he tries to pull out one of the swords but is unable to do it. Looking at his aching hands, he wonders why the sword is so heavy. Just then, he looks at the small dagger under the sword and easily pulls it out. With the dagger in his hand, Hyun-sung walks towards the door to survey his surroundings and get a grasp of the situation. Thinking that there might not be a lot of security around the room, he slowly opens the door. However, as soon as he opens the door, he finds a tall and strong person wearing armor standing in front of him. Shocked by his size, Hyun-sung wonders if he can take such a person down. Adding to this, the person is not alone but with an entire group of armed soldiers. Shocked, Hyun-sung loses his balance and falls to the ground while the armed person with a serious expression on his face grips his sword tightly. However, to his surprise, the person gets on his knees and starts paying his respects, addressing him as Lord, followed by the entire group doing the same. Shocked, Hyun-sung gazes at them, wondering what kind of backstory it is and if all these soldiers are under him. Confused, he goes near the person and asks which place it is and who he is. In response, the person tells him that it is his castle and he is the Lord, prompting Hyun-sung to ask what his name is. In response, the person reveals Hyun-sung's name in that world to be Ian Albaran. While Hyun-sung is thinking about who Lion Albaran was, the person holds him up, stating that he will move him to his bed. Hearing that, Hyun-sung feels a little embarrassed while the person takes him to bed and expresses his happiness at his awakening. He says that he was worried a lot about it, leading Hyun-sung to wonder if he is a sick lord in this backstory. Thinking about the aliens and monsters, Hyun-sung knows that those creatures made weapons based on existing living organisms. This leads him to fear that they might be trying to turn him into a weapon as well by building a virtual reality based on the history of civilization. Considering that, he wonders if they used a fantasy genre to set it up. Overly anxious, he turns his back towards the soldier and closes his eyes, wondering which genre he is in. Seeing him, the person gets up and starts to walk away, saying that he will bring back the healer, leading Hyun-sung to take a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, outside the castle, two people who seem to be high-ranking officials take a walk while discussing their relief at the awakening of the Lord. They discuss that if the Lord had died, a new Lord would have been dispatched by the palace, and it would be hard for them to deal with that person. In response, the other one states that it is right to do everything moderately, even if they want more. Hearing that, the person expresses that he should have saved some gold for himself before the territory went down. After careful consideration, he suggests to the other person that they should hide the gold for a year after the Lord dies. However, the other person reminds him of the security captain, who would not allow this plan to succeed. Nevertheless, he argues that the security captain is not an honest man either, but the other person counters that, being a knight, he cannot be corrupt. Enraged, the other one asks if they think of him as rotten to the core, but the other suggests observing the situation because they are still unsure if the Lord will even survive. Just then, a maid comes near them and whispers something in one of their ears. Upon hearing this, he tells the maid to keep a watchful eye on a particular person, and she complies. He then turns towards the other person, grinning, and reveals that the medicine fed to the Lord is effective. Relieved to hear that, the person suggests paying the Lord a visit, and they start to walk away. Meanwhile, in the room, Hyun-sung lies on the bed while the physician examines him. He thinks that he cannot sense anything dangerous from the people he has met so far and wonders if it is not a trick by those otherworlders. Considering the possibility of being transported there due to an issue in the wrapping, he wonders if he will have to live with that body for the rest of his life. Turning to the physician, he asks for his name, and the physician reveals it to be Dr. Nakarmo, stating that he has been in charge of the Lord's health for the last few years. Surprised at his expressions, the physician asks if he does not remember these things, causing him to just laugh anxiously. Dr. Nakarmo explains that temporary or permanent memory loss is possible if one suffers from a high fever or experiences something major. Just then, the soldier enters, informing Hyun-sung of the arrival of the financier and the administrator, and he allows them to come in. Following that, both officials enter, with one of them warmly greeting Hyun-sung. The person then comes near Hyun-sung's bed and pays his respects to him. Afterwards, he sits near the bed and holds Hyun-sung's arm, stating that his energetic face has dissipated all their worries, while deep down, he feels anxious at seeing him well. He explains that when Hyun-sung fell into a coma, he personally fed him medicine that was very hard to obtain, emphasizing how much he cares for him. In response, Hyun-sung simply smiles and takes his hand away. He then states that since he woke up, his memories have been blurry and he cannot identify them accurately. Shocked for a moment, they introduce themselves as the administrator, Nose, and the financier, Taman. Turning to the physician, Taman expresses his anger, asking what he did to make the Lord experience such an impact. While he pressures the physician to tell the truth, Nose keeps observing Hyun-sung, who sits enjoying the situation and thinks that something seems strange about him. While Nose suspiciously stares at him, Hyun-sung speaks up, telling them to calm down. He explains that he lost his memory due to coming back from the brink of death, but survived thanks to the doctor, and he cannot punish his savior. Hearing that, the physician expresses his gratitude to him, stating that he will never forget this kindness. Turning to Taman, Hyun-sung says that he will be asking them a lot of questions, and Taman agrees, saying that he can ask anything he is curious about. Meanwhile, in his mind, Taman feels happy for the Lord's memory loss, considering that it has put all the control in his hands. Just then, Nose calls out to Hyun-sung, stating that there is something he must decide urgently, prompting him to ask what it is. In response, Nose reveals that it is a mercenary recruitment order, stating that he collapsed before making his decision on the matter, causing Taman to burst into anger at Nose bringing it up. Confused, Hyun-sung asks what mercenary recruitment is, and Nose explains that it means hiring mercenaries in his name. Hyun-sung inquires about the reason for recruiting mercenaries, and Nose states that it is for subjugating the monsters, which harm people in economy and are more terrifying than normal beasts. Hearing about the monsters, Hyun-sung asks if there is a demon king as well, leaving Nose surprised. After a short pause, Nose reveals that the subjugation takes place every 5 years in their territory, and if they are to send mercenaries there, they must make a timely decision. Hearing that, Hyun-sung feels anxious, considering that he does not know anything about the background of the situation in order to make a decision. However, thinking it to be necessary, he is about to take a decision when Taman suddenly comes towards him and says that he must not decide hastily. He reveals that the territory's finances are in a very bad state at the moment, which makes it difficult for them to hire hundreds of mercenaries. Hearing this, Hyun-sung inquires how bad the condition is, asking if it is not possible to hire any mercenaries. Feeling pressured, Tommen says that they have enough for that, but they should consider the territory's future as well and not waste money like that. Hearing that, Hyun-sung stays silent for a moment and then reminds him of Nose's statement about the monsters destroying everything and asks if he wants them to turn a blind eye to that. In response, Tommen says that the people are quite resilient and there won't be many deaths, stating that monsters are like natural disasters and being killed by them is normal. Reiterating that Tommen is a financier who handles the money, Hyun-sung signals him to come closer. Confused, he complies, and Hyun-sung grabs him by his tie, leaving all others shocked. Bringing him closer, Hyun-sung states that he is not going to give up on his people so easily and reminds Tommen that they pay their taxes diligently. Letting him go, Hyun-sung states that if he turns a blind eye to the situation just to save some money, then no one will risk their lives to protect the territory for him. This leaves all of them speechless. Turning to Nose, Hyun-sung orders him to recruit the mercenaries immediately, and he complies. After that, both Nose and Tommen leave the room. While walking away, Tommen expresses his frustration at Hyun-sung's attitude. In response, Nose reminds him that he worried for the Lord's health the most, but he states that it was when the Lord was cowardly and timid. Hearing that, Nose simply smiles and tells him to go and estimate the budget for mercenary recruitment. Meanwhile, on the dining table, with numerous delicious dishes served, Hyun-sung continues to eat endlessly. Suddenly, he notices Rondo, the soldier, and the chamberlain staring at him with surprise and inquires what the matter is. In response, the person says that it is just that he is eating much better than usual. Hearing that, Hyun-sung states that he has lost his muscles from lying down for so long and wants to regain them, leaving them confused. Afterwards, he continues to eat again and finishes one of the dishes, asking for some more. In response, the chamberlain reveals that it is lamb stew and says that he will get some more of it. With that, he leaves holding the empty plates, and Hyun-sung continues to eat. Turning to Rondo, Hyun-sung offers to eat together, but he declines, saying that he is all right. Stating that it is embarrassing to be watched while eating, Hyun-sung orders him to eat with him, leaving Rondo surprised. After pondering for a moment, Rondo turns away, avoiding eye contact with Hyun-sung to make him feel comfortable. Observing this, Hyun-sung lets out a sigh and, in a threatening tone, asks if he needs to repeat himself 3 times. Left with no other option, Rondo reluctantly joins Hyun-sung at the table. However, instead of starting to eat, he remains confused and keeps looking down. After a while, he picks up the fork and gazes at the plate in front of him while Hyun-sung encourages him to taste it, claiming it's delicious. Nervously, Rondo takes a bite with the fork and begins to eat. After a while, Hyun-sung inquires about how it was, and Rondo remarks that it was exceptionally delicious. Pleased with the response, Hyun-sung mentions that he should eat well to ensure he stays strong enough to protect him. As Hyun-sung pours a drink into his glass, he brings up the topic of recruiting mercenaries and asks if their current soldiers are insufficient for the task. In response, Rondo reveals that their territory has 300 soldiers, half of whom are protecting the castle, while the rest are fighting the bandits under the command of the security captain. Upon hearing about the bandits, Hyun-sung is taken aback, and Rondo explains that they recently invaded their territory and raided one of the villages. He goes on to explain that Hyun-sung had ordered the security captain to lead some soldiers into the area. When Hyun-sung asks about their return, Rondo discloses that the battle is still ongoing due to the large number of bandits. However, he reassures Hyun-sung that the security captain is the kingdom's greatest swordsman, telling him not to worry. Feeling relieved to have such a powerful person as his subordinate, Hyun-sung asks for the captain's name, and he reveals it to be Charlane Depor. Meanwhile, in the middle of the dark forest, Charlane stands with a group of soldiers facing a few bandits. Just then, one of the bandits steps forward, expressing his absolute honor to meet Charlane. He mentions having heard about Charlane leaving the Royal Knights but hadn't expected to encounter him as a soldier of Alberin. Feeling excited, the bandit brandishes his axe, stating that this day has brought him a golden opportunity, while Charlane remains stoic. Drawing closer, the bandit declares that if he defeats Charlane, he will be acknowledged as the continent's greatest warrior, but Charlane remains calm, holding his sword firmly. With a determination to take Charlane down and gain fame, the bandit rushes towards him, wielding axes in both hands, while Charlene readies himself for the fight. Meanwhile, the remaining bandits hold their bows, fix their target at Charlene, and start to launch attacks. Seeing countless arrows coming in his direction, Charlene, with a single move of his sword, breaks all of them, leaving the archers bewildered. Believing that Charlene's attention is on the archers, the bandit leaps up to launch a swift attack, but Charlene effortlessly blocks it. He then swiftly swings his sword in the opposite direction, causing the bandit to stumble back. Seeing this, the leader of the archers anxiously urges them to reload their bows. Seeing that, one of Charlene's comrades called them cowards. This angers the person leading them, who asserts that they cannot undermine the bandits' teamwork by calling them cowards, as they are people who live and die together. Hearing that, Charlene's comrade steps forward, declaring her intention to fight alongside him, but he insists on fighting alone. Addressing the bandits, Charlene remarks that living and dying together is too much of a friendship for people like them. The person retorts, stating that they live and die for loyalty and are not like them, who blindly follow nobles. After remaining silent for a while, Charlene announces that his wish for death will be granted. With that, he charges his sword with a strange energy. Seeing that the person holds tightly to his axe, Charlene is finally revealing his real power. Suddenly, the axe begins to glow, and its holder reveals that Charlene is not the only one capable of wielding force. However, suddenly, an overwhelming amount of energy envelops Charlene, while his comrade instructs the other soldiers to stay back, stating that the battle is already over. Meanwhile, Charlene, empowered by the immense energy channeled into his sword, stands before the bandits, leaving them shocked at the raw power he possesses. Turning to the archers, the bandit orders them to strike him with arrows, and they comply, launching arrows at him. Witnessing this, Charlene swings his sword, creating an impact that leaves the bandits stunned. Suddenly, deep cuts form on the bodies of all the bandits, causing them to crash to the ground, calling Charlene a monster before meeting their demise. Meanwhile, in the castle, Tommen approaches Dr. Nicarmo to inquire about the potion being prepared to treat the Lord's memory loss. Nicarmo informs him that there is only one ingredient left to complete it. Peering at the large pot containing a boiling liquid, Tommen questions whether the Lord will truly return to normal after consuming it. Nicarmo explains that while it will recover his memory loss, the changes in his personality might not be reversible. Upon hearing this, Tommen strolls towards the shelves, suggesting that the room was originally a booze cellar. Nicarmo confirms this, revealing that the previous Lord transformed it into an apothecary for him. Tommen picks up one of the bottles from the shelf, noting that their number won't reduce anytime soon since the current Lord is young and weak, to which Nicarmo agrees. However, Tommen notices that the expensive bottles have decreased significantly and places the bottle back on the shelf. Turning to Nicarmo, he asks if he has been using these bottles for medical purposes, leaving the doctor confused. In a moment of anger, Tommen grabs Nicarmo by his clothes and takes him to the boiling potion. Bringing him near the potion, Tommen threatens to kill him if he fails to bring the Lord back to how he was before. At that moment, Nicarmo's daughter enters the room, bringing the scarlet lizard tail he asked for. Seeing her, Tommen backs off, quickly changes the topic, and begins to step out. As the girl watches him go with confusion clouding her mind, Tommen shuts the door behind him. After he leaves, the girl turns to Nicarmo, asking what happened. After a brief pause, Nicarmo discards the potion and instructs Linda, his daughter, to bring the volcanic centipede instead. Perplexed, she questions if he really wants her to fetch such a thing, and he confirms, growing frustrated. However, she reminds him that the Lord consumed it a few years ago, which made him sick. Overly frustrated, Nicarmo turns to her, telling her to do as told. Complying, she quietly reaches for the drawers and brings them back. Holding it, Nicarmo decides to see if Tommen's situation improves the way he wants. Preparing a new medicine from the centipede, Nicarmo takes it to Hyun-sung, who inquires about its contents. Nicarmo explains that it is a medicine made from volcanic centipede, and Linda elaborates on its impact on the human body. After listening, Hyun-sung asks who Linda is, and Nicarmo introduces her as his daughter. Linda also introduces herself and asks if he really doesn't remember her. After studying her for a while, Hyun-sung wonders if they truly knew each other. Glancing at the medicine, he inquires about its effectiveness, and Nicarmo assures him that it will work. However, Linda explains that if the medicine does not suit his body constitution, It can become dangerous, and she forbids him from consuming it forcefully. Nevertheless, thinking that he should take advantage of such a rare medicine, Hyun-sung takes the bowl in his hands. He believes that he cannot act as the Lord with such a weak body and might die soon. He also suspects that the physician might want to poison him. However, looking at Linda, he realizes that she is genuinely concerned about his health. Therefore, he decides to simply drink the medicine and see what happens, and he does so. As he drinks the medicine, Nakarmo and Linda gaze at him, anticipating the reaction. After finishing the entire bowl, Hyun-sung looks at them, and Nakarmo inquires how it was. Suddenly, he begins to feel like throwing up, making Nakarmo concerned. Linda remarks that the medicine might not be suitable for his body. This intensifies Nakarmo's concern, yet to his surprise, Hyun-sung becomes fine after a moment and asks for a candy, stating that its taste is disgusting. Just then, Rondo enters, asking what is going on. Looking at him, Hyun-sung tells him to calm down, stating that he is all right. However, just then, he feels his body badly trembling and begins to scream loudly, leaving them all shocked and concerned. Turning to the physician, Rondo asks why he is acting this way, and Nakarmo tells him that he took the volcanic centipede medicine, and his body must have reacted adversely to it. Hearing this, Rondo frustratedly asks why he gave him the same medicine again while knowing about its side effects on him. Linda states that they need to make him throw up fast and checks his pulse, while Hyun-sung assures her that he is fine and can manage. Surprised at his resilience, Linda begins to help Rondo take off his clothes and tells them to get some cold water ready in the bathtub and add ice to it. Afterwards, Rondo takes him to the bathtub and puts him in the cold water. After a while, Hyun-sung regains consciousness and turns to Linda, asking if the medicine will be effective, and she agrees, stating that she was unaware of the severe initial reaction. Concerned, Rondo asks if he will be all right, and Nakarmo agrees, stating that he will be fine after the body temperature goes down and asking him to wait. Just like that, the day turns into night, and Linda keeps adding more and more ice to keep the water cold. Seeing her, Hyun-sung states that he feels bad because she cannot go home due to her responsibility to take care of him. In response, she states that she was the one who brought it upon herself and that he was holding up quite well in the morning. Hearing that, Hyun-sung says that she called this medicine precious, and he has to be willing to endure that much. Hearing that, Linda remarks that he has definitely changed a lot, revealing that in the past, all he did was complain whenever he saw her. This surprises Hyun-sung, while Linda continues to say that he was having a very hard time as a lord and was acting quite unstable for a while. However, right after saying that, she realizes her wrong word choice and apologizes to him, but he states that it is fine. Changing the topic, Linda asks if his temperature is fine, and he agrees, stating that he is feeling much better than before. Stating that her hands are cold because of the ice, she uses her forehead to check his temperature and finds it to be better, telling him to get out of the ice water. After blankly staring at her for a while, Hyun-sung comes out of the water and starts feeling old, getting a fever again. The next morning, Linda, who had unknowingly slept beside the bathtub, wakes up and does not find Hyun-sung, feeling shocked and worried. She starts calling out to him just as Hyun-sung arrives from behind, asking why she was calling. Suddenly, he starts to feel hungry and turns to Linda, asking if she wants to have breakfast with him, leaving her surprised. Meanwhile, in Taman's castle, a person covering his face enters and tells the guards that he wants to see Taman. Hearing that, the servants take him inside, where Taman welcomes him, addressing him as Zeridin. In a disappointed tone, Zeridin remarks that the Lord does not have a short-lived fate since he woke up again, unlike what they expected. However, Taman considers it fortunate, saying that if there were to be a new lord, they would have to bribe him too, prompting Zeridin to congratulate him. Just then, Taman states that there is a problem and reveals that the lord almost feels like a different person ever since he woke up. Shocked, Zeridin asks if it is really the case, and Taman begins to explain the entire situation to him. After finishing the meal and hearing everything, Zeridin remarks that it is very hard to believe, and Taman states that he feels the same way. Zeridin states that the Lord is now 15 and is reaching the age where he can take leadership in front of his people, which can lead to decreasing their external influence in the kingdom. Therefore, he suggests they need a plan and proposes making the Lord sick again. Agreeing, Taman states that they need to make him suffer but not die, and Zeridin concurs, saying they are good as long as he stays alive. In response, Taman, with a cruel smile on his face, agrees and begins to laugh loudly. Haeun-sung goes to try on his newly sewn clothes, and, taking his measurements, the chamberlain remarks that he seems to have grown up more since the previous day. Hearing that, Haeun-sung asks if the sewing needs to be redone. However, the chamberlain states that since he will continue to grow up, they will make the clothes larger with room for him to grow into them. After putting on his new clothes, he leaves the room and walks through the corridor, suddenly coming across a closed room. Stopping in front of it, he asks what this place is, and the chamberlain informs him that it is an office. Considering it to be his workplace, he opens the door without listening to the people behind him. As he enters the room, he finds it to be quite dirty and the furniture to be covered up. Seeing that, he turns to Rondo and the chamberlain, remarking that they do not clean this place. In response, the chamberlain reveals that he had ordered this place to be torn down, which surprises him. When he asks for the reason behind that, the chamberlain states that he is not sure if he should tell them, but Haeun-sung asks him to share whatever it is. The chamberlain reveals that it is the place where his father died, shocking him. Sitting at the table, Haeun-sung asks if his father died due to an increasing workload. However, Rondo reveals that it is not the case. Instead, the former lord was assassinated, which shocks him. The chamberlain reveals that he was found lying on the desk Haeun-sung is sitting on right now. Hearing that, Haeun-sung quickly gets down from the desk and removes the cloth covering it, finding bloodstains on it. Standing still, he inquires who assassinated his father, and Rondo reveals that they have never been able to discover it. This makes him understand why he would give such an order since he took over the position of his father without even knowing who assassinated him. After a while, he goes near the window and looks down at the beautiful scene of the village and the forest nearby. Looking at those, he orders the chamberlain to turn this place into his bedroom, leaving both the chamberlain and Rondo shocked. Haeun-sung states that he likes the location of the village from this room. Hearing this, the chamberlain agrees to give the room to him, albeit feeling surprised. After some time, Taman enters the room and finds numerous servants working in it, converting it into a bedroom. Confused, he stops one of the maids to ask what they are doing, and the maid informs him that the lord wants to use this office as his bedroom. Shocked, Taman thinks the lord is crazy to use the room where his father was assassinated as his bedroom. Just then, the vice-chamberlain, without noticing Taman, urges all other servants to finish the work quickly, stating that the lord will be using this room from tonight on. Just then, one of the maids informs him of Taman's arrival, and he quickly turns back, greeting him. Taman asks him about the lord using the office as his bedroom, and he states that he is not sure about the complete details. Taman asks if it is due to his memory loss, but the person reveals that the chamberlain explained the details to the lord, but he gave the order without much surprise on his face. After a while, the vice-chamberlain says that he heard something else as well. When asked, he reveals that Haeun-sung remarked about the clear view of the village from the room. Hearing that, Taman becomes frustrated, wondering if the lord has started to gain interest in his territory. At night, while Haeun-sung is busy doing push-ups on his fingers, he is informed of Linda's arrival, and he gets up, telling her to let her in. After a while, she enters, asking if she was called. Looking at Haeun-sung, she remarks that he has grown taller in just a day, but he states that it is only because of her and her father. While she remains silent in response, Haeun-sung asks why she is standing still, and she says it is nothing and asks about the reason for calling her. In response, Haeun-sung says that he has something to ask and shows her a page with details about the recruitment of mercenaries, making her confused. Haeun-sung tells her that it is the expense report for the budget required for mercenary recruitment, which Taman gave him, prompting her to ask the reason for giving it to her. In response, Haeun-sung reveals that his memory loss is not a problem he faced after waking up, and he cannot simply stamp the documents that the financier submits while he can't read them. Stating that he does not want others to know that he cannot read, he asks if Linda will help him. In response, Linda states that the secret can be dangerous for him, especially if the financier finds out about it. So she agrees to help him by going through the document so that he can work on it further. Changing the topic, she asks if he knows what kind of room it is, and he agrees, stating that he has heard about it. In response, she tells him to be careful, stating that people call this a cursed room. Hearing that, Haeun-sung states that he knows about the incident that occurred in the room, but he will not be scared by something like that. In response, Linda reveals that he is mistaken and tells him that more than one person has died in this room. She further discloses that ever since the Alberan family established their reign, 3 lords have died in this room, and they were all assassinated. Hearing that, Hyun-sung feels shocked, but Linda continues to warn him to be careful. In response, Hyun-sung states that if there is someone who wants to kill him, they can also target him outside the room. Therefore, the rumor of this room being cursed means nothing to him. Hearing this, Linda states that she is sure he will be fine on his own and advises him to make preparations for Cavernia language lessons. After she leaves, Hyun-sung rests his back on the table, dismissing the rumor of the room being cursed as nonsense. That night, while Hyun-sung is deeply engrossed in sleep, he has a nightmare about the monster he killed in his previous life. This is followed by the memory of his encounter with the alien, to whom he got teleported and ended up in the castle. Upon waking up suddenly and realizing it was just a nightmare, he regrets asking for his room to be changed. Seeing all that, he gets down from the bed and looks at the study table, thinking that it is a room where many people died and understanding why people avoid entering it. He decides to put a knife under his pillow to avoid sleep paralysis. After doing that, he reaches for his window. Feeling nostalgic, he opens the window and gazes outside, reminiscing about the night view from the tower he conquered and realizing that he hasn't seen a night view in a long time. Suddenly, he notices a carriage heading towards the port, guarded by soldiers who don't seem to belong to their territory. He observes the boxes being taken out of the carriage and loaded onto a large boat, wondering what they contain. Thinking they might be transporting something, he gazes at them, and suddenly, a bright light begins to glow around him. This light teleports him to the port, where he suddenly appears in front of the soldiers, making them confused. In a threatening tone, one of the soldiers tells him to identify himself in an instant and brings fire near him, making him confused. Looking at the fire and the fearsome soldiers gathering around him, he thinks of it as dangerous and quickly introduces himself as the Lord of Alberan. This makes them surprised, and they start discussing amongst themselves whether he really is the Lord. However, just then, one of them remarks that they shouldn't be fooled, claiming that the Lord is like a living corpse who never leaves his bed. The soldier states that if Hyun-sung is the Lord, then he himself is the king of Bellarine, making Hyun-sung confused. Suddenly, the soldier draws his sword and attempts to attack him, but Hyun-sung blocks the attack with his small dagger. As the soldier continues exerting force, Hyun-sung continues to block the attacks and eventually makes the soldier drop his sword. He turns to them, stating that it is a misunderstanding and that he is indeed the Lord of Alberan. However, the soldiers refuse to believe him and ask how he dared to brandish a knife towards the Knights of Hypatia. In response, Hyun-sung smiles and shows them the knife, explaining that it was never unsheathed. The soldier becomes angry upon hearing this and orders all his fellow soldiers to kill him. Therefore, as the attacks on Hyun-sung begin, he barely manages to avoid them while fleeing. Amidst the chaos, one of the boxes breaks, and Hyun-sung finds them filled with gold coins but decides to prioritize his escape and swiftly gets over the carriage. After successfully climbing up, he rests one of his hands on the roof of the carriage, contemplating his next move. Suddenly, a soldier thrusts his sword through the roof, injuring Hyun-sung's hand. Surveying his surroundings, he realizes there is no escape route and looks towards the castle, wondering what his soldiers are doing. Just then, Hyun-sung notices Rondo standing above the castle roof, and he calls out for help. However, Rondo remains still and does not respond, while more soldiers start to climb up the carriage, intensifying his anxiety. Shortly after, a faint light begins to glow around him, and he gets teleported to the place where Rondo is. Turning to Hyun-sung, Rondo says that he heard his voice and asks when he arrived. In response, Hyun-sung inquires about the mysterious soldiers at the port. Surprised, Rondo turns towards the port to see, while Hyun-sung reveals that the soldiers had a wolf emblem on their armor and said the word Hypatia. Hearing this, Rondo explains that Hypatia is Lord Bonan's territory and wonders why his soldiers are there. Hyun-sung informs Rondo that the soldiers had a carriage filled with gold coins as well. Rondo reveals that the soldiers from that territory come once or twice a year to collect the debt the previous lord owed to their lord. Surprised by this revelation, Hyun-sung asks if they also have debts, to which Rondo agrees and suggests consulting the financier for details. Frustrated by Taman's concealment of these details, Hyun-sung orders Rondo to call him, prompting Rondo to ask if he wants to meet Taman at that moment. In response, Hyun-sung questions what is wrong with the Lord summoning his subordinate at any time. Returning to his room, Hyun-sung places the dagger back on the table and feels pain in his injured hand. He suddenly recalls using teleportation to reach the soldiers at the port and is shocked by the memory. He wonders if the power of teleportation is a side effect of what happened to him in the teleportation machine. Trying to calm himself, he unintentionally clenches his injured fist, causing immense pain. Frustrated by the attack on his own land, he contemplates negotiating with Lord Bonin to lessen his debts, showing proof of the attack by his subordinates. He ties a handkerchief to his wound, knowing that he cannot rely on Linda's care this time. Meanwhile, a messenger reaches Taman's castle and informs him about being called by the Lord. Questioning if the Lord has lost his mind, Taman gets ready and walks towards his carriage, thinking that the Lord is spared only for his usefulness. After a short while, Taman arrives at the castle and goes inside, ascending the never-ending stairs with annoyance due to the Lord's demands. Upon entering the room, he masks his anger with a polite expression and asks if he was summoned. In response, Hyun-sung apologizes for calling him so late and asks if he is tired, but he states that he is fine. Hyun-sung reveals that he was about to go to bed but could not fall asleep because of something on his mind, making Taman curious. Resting his back against the sofa, Hyun-sung asks how much debt his father still has left. Surprised, Taman asks if this was the reason for calling him, and he agrees, stating that he wanted to know the initial debt, the interest rate, and the remaining debt to make plans. Checking in his diary, Taman reveals that the previous lord left behind a debt of around 460,000 gold, of which 410,000 gold still remains. Hearing that, Hyun-sung inquires about the soldier's salary, and Taman reveals it to be 2 golds per normal soldier. After saying that, Taman asks if he has cleared out all the questions of the Lord. However, Hyun-sung, who is still engrossed in thought, asks if they have only been able to pay 50,000 gold in a total of 3 years. Yet, Taman explains that they had saved all they could by even cutting back on their basic expenses to pay that much. Hearing that, Hyun-sung asks about the sources of income, and he reveals that the money comes in the form of taxes from 172 villages and also from merchants. He states that even with the income from their quarries and mines, after covering the basic expenses, they would only be left with 20,000 gold coins every year. In response, Hyun-sung inquires if it will take them decades to pay back the debt they have. Taman agrees but states that it would be better to get over this faster because of the increasing interest. Feeling curious, Hyun-sung asks why his father is indebted to Lord Bonin, prompting Taman to ask if he has regained his memories, but he explains that Rondo told it to him. Taman reveals that every year, Lord Bonin hosts a deer hunting competition with nearby lords to develop connections, which also serves as a place for gambling. Understanding that, Hyun-sung remarks that the luck of Lord Bonin was good one day, and Taman agrees. Realizing that all the debt came from gambling, Hyun-sung asks if no one bothered to stop his father when he was doing it. Hearing that, Taman reveals that he was also there when that happened, leaving Hyun-sung shocked. Feeling embarrassed, Hyun-sung inquires about the fastest way to pay off all the debt. In response, Taman states that it would be possible after selling the majority of their gold mines, iron mines, and quarries to merchants and doubling the taxes. He says that by doing that, they will be able to pay off all the debt within a few years. Hearing that, Hyun-sung asks what their source of income will be after paying back all their debt. However, Taman emphasizes focusing on the present, stating that the more they delay it, the more they will have to pay because of the policy of interest. In response, Hyun-sung stays silent for a while, making Taman frustrated. Controlling his anger, Taman states that he should not think very hard and instead sell the mines, offering to look for a buyer. However, to his surprise, Hyun-sung states that he does not like that idea at the moment and will talk about it later. Hearing that, Taman asks him to at least consider doubling the taxes on the citizens. In response, Hyun-sung states that he should cut Taman's wage in half to save money, leaving him shocked. Looking at his expressions, Hyun-sung states that if he does not like his own money being cut in half, he should not suggest increasing taxes on others. However, Taman keeps insisting that he should follow his advice, stating that as an indebted lord, his soldier count will decrease and he will lose the trust of the people. However, Hyun-sung asks him to think of something else, but he states that he has already offered him a solution. In response, Hyun-sung becomes angry, asking if this is the only solution he has and if he wants him to find a new financier, leading him to feel pressured and nervous. Feeling angry at this behavior, Tommen thinks that he tried his best to talk nicely, but he cannot stand with such a person anymore. Meanwhile, Hyun-sung keeps scolding him for even showing rude expressions. Hyun-sung tells Tommen to bring an appropriate solution to the problem of their debts by the next day. After that, Tommen leaves the room, feeling enraged at Hyun-sung's behavior. Meanwhile, Hyun-sung goes to bed, feeling tired from the eventful night. However, as soon as he lies down on the bed, the blood-stained dagger placed on the table begins to glow. Shocked, he quickly gets up, feeling someone's presence, and gets down from the bed, deciding to deal with the person in the room. He reaches for his dagger and is shocked to find someone's eyes glowing on the weapon. Suddenly, a strange spirit-like creature emerges from within the dagger and asks if he is able to see them, leaving him utterly shocked. Hyun-sung remembers the time in his life about 10 years ago when the Otherworlders invaded the planet and he joined the militia. After fighting against them, Hyun-sung attempted to attack their base but was caught up in the teleportation device, which sent him into a void where monsters and magic existed. There he acquired the body of a sickly lord and experienced teleportation while fighting against the mysterious soldiers. Adding to this is the psychological torment that he faces after shifting into the room that was previously the office of the former lords. Just then, Rondo, who hears his scream, enters the room, asking what is wrong, while the spirit tells him that they are not his enemies and he does not need to be worried. Pointing to the spirits, Hyun-sung asks Rondo if he can see them. In response, Rondo inquires if he is referring to the dagger. Hearing that, Hyun-sung holds his head, realizing that the spirit might not be visible to him. Meanwhile, the spirit reveals that they have been trapped inside the dagger for hundreds of years because of the magician's curse, and this is the first time that a human has noticed them. Looking at Hyun-sung, Rondo asks if he should request medical assistance, but Hyun-sung states that he is just tired and tells him to leave. After that, he begins to walk towards his bed, while the spirit tells him that they have been watching him. The spirit introduces themselves as Blanzor, the nation's greatest swordsman who guarded the emperor of Dazone Kingdom, but Hyun-sung states that he is not interested in it. However, when Blanzor reveals that they watched him when he entered Ion's dying body, Hyun-sung becomes surprised and asks if they know the reason behind it, to which Blanzor disagrees. Feeling frustrated, Hyun-sung lies down on the bed again when Blanzor states that they also saw him teleporting to a distant location. Hearing that, Hyun-sung asks if they know anything about teleportation, but they again disagree. Frustrated, Hyun-sung tells them to let him sleep, stating that he is tired, but Blanzor says that ignoring them is pointless and he will have to keep listening. Considering that, Hyun-sung repeats everything that Blanzor told him about themselves and asks what they want from him. In response, Blanzor reveals that, despite being trapped inside the dagger, they must fulfill the task assigned to them by the emperor. Hyun-sung takes a deep breath and inquires about the task given to them by the emperor. Blanzor discloses that there were two tasks. The first was to slay the dark magician Hakrobetiaman, and the second was to retrieve the dragon's eye, stolen from the imperial family. Upon hearing about the dragon's eye, Hyun-sung is surprised. Blanzor explains that it is the eye of an ancient dragon that disappeared long ago, but some of the dragon's power is infused in it, which the magician used to trap them inside the dagger. Hyun-sung asks if the dragon's eye functions like a dragon's ball, granting a wish. Blanzor responds that the emperor who wanted them trapped is now dead, but the eye cannot fall into the hands of humanity and must be destroyed. Curious about the dragon eye's whereabouts, Hyun-sung asks if Blanzor knows where it is. Blanzor reveals that it should be buried somewhere in the dark magician's home, where they fought him. Inquiring about the location of the dark magician's home, Hyun-sung learns that it is situated in the lands of Hapasha, the territory of Lord Banan. Feeling overwhelmed by the task, Hyun-sung lies back on the bed, stating that he is too busy and tired to undertake such a mission. However, Blanzor insists that it is necessary, offering to teach him the emperor's swordsmanship, the pinnacle of swordsmanship, as a reward for helping them. They promise to bestow on Hyun-sung the power to become the greatest swordsman in the land. Hyun-sung declines the offer, expressing that he doesn't wish to master swordsmanship as he can hire skilled knights to fight on his behalf. Remembering Charlene, he states that he already has the kingdom's best swordsman as his subordinate. Hearing that, Blanzor asks who he is, and Hyun-sung tells his name, stating that he has not personally met him yet. Upon hearing Charlene's name, Blanzor reveals that Charlene was the person who assassinated the previous lord in that room, leaving Hyun-sung shocked. Meanwhile, Charlene continues his mission against the bandits and enters a forest where numerous people, including women and children, lie dead on the ground. His comrade informs him that all the hostages have been killed and the bandits have escaped into Lobalong, outside their jurisdiction. Stating that, she asks if they should not return to the castle, saying that if they continue pursuing them, they might end up starting a territorial conflict. After thinking for a while, Charlene mounts on his horse and commands the soldiers to get ready, stating that they will follow the bandits. He is determined to show the entire world what happens to those who mess with Alberin. Meanwhile, the bandits who escaped reach Lobalong and assume that the soldiers will not follow them to such a distant place. The head of the bandits states that the lord of this area is against Alberin, and if the soldiers of Alberin create a conflict at their borders, they might end up fighting against each other. However, he acknowledges that Charlene could still track them. To their surprise, Charlene arrives from behind with his soldiers. Before the bandits can react, the soldiers unleash a barrage of arrows, killing most of them, while Charlene confidently walks towards them, ready to confront the remaining bandits. Seeing that, their leader becomes enraged and decides to fight Charlene. However, before he can move from his place, Charlene reaches for him and kicks him so hard that he crashes to the ground. After that, Charlene puts his foot above him and starts hitting him with it, causing him to experience a lot of pain. Meanwhile, the other soldiers also come into action and start killing all the bandits. Putting his sword on their leader's neck, Charlene asks why he killed the hostages even after getting a chance to escape intact. In response, the leader says that he did it to maintain his image as a boss, stating that his subordinates would have stopped following him if he had simply run away. Hearing that, Charlene pierces his sword through the person's body, causing him to die instantly, and states that he also has an image to maintain. The next day in the castle, Hyun-sung starts taking classes from Linda in order to learn how to read and write. After writing all the letters, he shows the paper to Linda, asking how it looks, but she states that his focus should be on memorizing and not beautifying his handwriting. After that, she assures him that he will successfully learn how to pronounce all these 32 letters by the next time, making him feel excited. In response, he asks if she is going to give him a reward if he properly pronounces all these letters, confusing her. He explains that students do their best if motivated by rewards, and she agrees but states that she does not have anything that he would want to have. Hearing that, Hyun-sung gives her the idea of granting one of his wishes, which she likes and agrees to do. She states that because he is making efforts to make Alberin a better place to live, she should grant whatever wish he has. Excited, he asks her to promise that she will grant his wish if he memorizes all these letters by the next day, and she agrees. After that, she expresses her relief that Hyun-sung is the same adorable person, revealing that she thought him to be a completely different person after waking up. This makes Hyun-sung feel happy, but Linda begins to feel embarrassed for saying such a thing in front of the Lord. Therefore, she quickly takes her leave, stating that she has a patient to treat, and he allows it. After that, she reminds him to memorize all the letters by the next day and leaves the room. Meanwhile, Hyun-sung, feeling overjoyed, wonders if Linda also likes him. Just then, he notices a huge shadow behind him and quickly turns around to find Charlene standing behind him, holding his sword tightly. However, before Hyun-sung can react, Charlene quickly pulls out his sword and slashes Hyun-sung with it, causing all the papers placed on the table to be filled with blood. Just then, Hyun-sung wakes up with a jerk and realizes that it was just a dream. Linda, who is still sitting in front of him, asks if he slept well, and he apologizes, saying that he did not sleep much last night. Hearing that, Linda states that although he is healthy, he should avoid roaming around at night, considering that he is already injured. Remembering something, Hyun-sung turns to Linda and asks if the people in his territory like him. Confused, she inquires why he is asking her such a thing, and he replies that he only needs a thorough understanding of the territory and requests that she be honest. Hearing that, she begins to hesitate, which makes Hyun-sung realize that his people do not have a very positive image of him in their minds. However, Linda explains that their feelings are understandable, revealing that the taxes rise substantially, which, along with other monetary policies, has led the poor to become slaves. Shocked to hear that, Hyun-sung asks how he can do something like that, but Linda explains that she knows it is not happening because he wants it. Instead, it is the result of the greed of the financier and military official, and what he has done is allow them to do that. Hearing this, Hyun-sung feels enraged, but Linda stops him from blaming himself, saying that he only did that because he was scared. She tells him that his father, the last one in the family, was assassinated, and while a child, he was left all alone with the culprit still at large and no one for him to rely on. While she is explaining that, Hyun-sung bursts into anger, inquiring why they are unable to pay debts if they are collecting taxes in such a large amount. Looking at Linda's reaction, Hyun-sung tells her that the financier suggested he double the taxes to pay the debts. Linda forbids him from doing it, stating that it may cause an insurgency, and he assures her that he has already declined that suggestion. He then inquires about where the people are slaving, and Linda reveals that they are working in the mines, and some of them die under the harsh conditions without even being fed properly. Hearing that, Hyun-sung becomes overwhelmed with anger, realizing that there is a problem even bigger than the debt. Turning to Linda, he thanks her for being honest, and she states that she trusts him fully. Changing the topic, Hyun-sung asks about what kind of person Charlene is. In response, Linda tells him that he trains soldiers, maintains public order, and has always been faithful to his job. However, noticing her gloomy expression, Hyun-sung asks her about the reason, and she states that it is just a shame, making him feel confused. She explains that Charlene does not involve himself in politics at all, but if he had protected the Lord more diligently, then no one would have dared to push him around. Hearing that, he thanks Linda for providing him with all the information, stating that he has become able to understand all of it because of her. After that, she takes her leave, stating that she has a patient to treat, and Hyun-sung bids her farewell. After she leaves the room, Hyun-sung takes out the dagger and asks Blanzor about the reason Charlene killed the former lord. However, Blanzor replies that they are not aware of the reason behind it and just witnessed the murder. This makes him feel frustrated, and he inquires what it is that Blanzor knows, and they state that they can teach him the Emperor's swordsmanship. Blanzor suggests that he forgets about the territory and moves to the mountains to train for 30 years, leading him to sarcastically remark that it is a fresh idea. Blanzor states that if he learns the Emperor's swordsmanship, his subordinates will follow him while being captivated by his power, which will help him raise his own empire. Taking a deep breath, Hyun-sung remarks that even living as a lord is hard for him. However, Blanzor states that a powerless lord usually lives thusly, revealing that staying in the situation he is in will cause a revolt against him, leading him to get killed. It is at this time that he will realize that he has missed his chance to live. Hearing that, Hyun-sung considers it pointless, saying that Blanzor is not saying it for his sake, but because they fear that he might die without finding the dragon's eye. Hearing that, Blanzor becomes angry, stating that they are saying this for Hyun-sung's sake and telling him not to misunderstand it. Understanding Blanzor's concern for him, Hyun-sung jokes that they are surely not sundeer, making them feel annoyed. Hyun-sung states that despite being unaware of how strong the Emperor's swordsmanship is, he is a person who has spent more than 10 years fighting and is capable enough to protect himself. Hearing that, Blanzor comes out of the dagger, asking him to show some of his skills. After materializing in human form for the first time, Blanzor turns out to be a woman. Shocked, Hyun-sung looks at her, asking if she is really a woman. She remarks that no matter how many centuries pass, the reactions of the people do not change, asking if it is not possible for a woman to be the best swordsman in the nation. Coming back to the original topic, she asks Hyun-sung to show the skills that he was talking about, confusing him. Reminding him about his use of teleportation the previous day, Blanzor asks if he remembers the type of situation he was in before getting teleported. After thinking for a while, Hyun-sung reveals that the first time he got teleported was when he was looking at the soldiers transporting something at the port. The second time, he got teleported while calling out for Rondo, who was in the castle far away. Remembering both of these, Hyun-sung wonders if it became possible after he fixed his sight on them far away. Blanzor suggests testing it, and he gets up from his chair and follows her, who goes out of the window without opening it. As he reaches for the window, he sees Blanzor standing down by the castle, looking at him. She tells him to focus his sight on her, and he follows, staring at her with all his focus. Suddenly, he disappears from the room and appears in front of Blanzor, causing her to remark that the mechanism of working this skill is fascinating. She reveals that there were magicians in the past who teleported, but she has never heard of someone getting teleported without opening a portal. Stating that he has shown her something interesting, Blanzor says that it is now her turn to show him some of her swordsmanship. With that, she summons a formidable sword and tells him to try and dodge or block her attack. She then leaps up in the air and launches countless strikes in the air, causing her sword to duplicate and go in Hyun-sung's direction. Looking at the countless swords coming in his direction, Hyun-sung feels shocked. Meanwhile, Blanzor focuses all her power on the sword, causing a gigantic illusion of a wolf to emerge behind her. The next moment, the wolf runs towards him at a great speed, causing him to feel afraid and try to block it. Looking at him sitting on the ground, Blanzor starts to laugh, asking if he was really that scared of the sword's illusion that he tried to dodge or block it. Getting up, Hyun-sung asks if it was the Emperor's swordsmanship, causing her to laugh loudly. She reveals that this technique is called the Beast Sword, which is a basic technique that everyone learns before becoming even a bodyguard for the Emperor. She states that the Emperor's swordsmanship is a technique that is hundreds of times more fearsome than this technique and was not made to be used by humans in the first place. Feeling confused, Hyun-sung asks why it was not made to be used by humans, and Blanzor replies that in order to understand it, he needs to know the history of the Empire. Hearing that, Hyun-sung states that he is not interested in knowing it at the expense of learning the entire history of the Empire. He says that he starts to walk away, telling her that he has to go somewhere. Meanwhile, in the office building of the territory, Nose meets Tommen and inquires about him being summoned by the Lord last night. In response, Tommen reveals the details of their meeting while feeling annoyed. Nose considers it normal for a lord to ask about the financial conditions of his land, but Tommen emphasizes that he has never done this before and highlights the need to take action quickly. In response, Nose asks how they are supposed to do it, and Tommen suggests adopting a carrot and stick approach. Hearing that, Nose asks what to use as a carrot and a stick. Tommen states that since the Lord is 15, he will start looking for a wife, so they will send him beautiful women to get distracted and forget about the kingdom. Nose then asks about his suggestion for the stick, and Tommen suggests making the Lord sick again and rendering him useless to the point that he will not be able to control what is going on. Nose states that the stick is too strong and can lead to the death of the Lord, which is very risky. Therefore, they decide to discuss the stick on another day and start preparing carrots for that time. Suddenly, they hear a sound and reach the window to see what is happening. Outside the window, Hyun-sung stands on the carriage roof, announcing that he will cut all the taxes in that area by half. Hearing that, Tommen feels enraged, while the poor people feel overjoyed at his announcement and his presence among them. Looking at the excitement of the people, Rondo comes out of the carriage, telling Hyun-sung that it is dangerous. However, Hyun-sung states that he likes their energy and suggests maintaining it in the government building too. Sitting on the carriage roof behind him, Blanzor advises him never to be blinded by his power, and he smiles. He states that with great power comes great responsibility, and he is aware of that, reassuring Blanzor not to worry about it. Just then, his carriage passes their office building, and all the officials start to emerge from within to greet him. Looking at Tommen standing among them, Hyun-sung states that it would not be bad to abuse his power a little and smiles, intending to boss around for some time. Stopping in front of the government building, Hyun-sung jumps down from the carriage and reaches Tommen, who welcomes him. Tommen states that he was not expecting him to visit so suddenly, but Hyun-sung says that they also take time out of their day to visit him, so he thought of returning the favor at least once. Stating that, he expresses his wish to look around the government building, and Nose requests that he come inside. After that, he moves inside the building and reaches a door opening, which reveals a beautiful garden with colorful flowers, freshwater ponds, and benches. Entering the garden, Hyun-sung remarks that it is even more beautiful than the one at the castle and states that they must have put a lot of money and effort into making it. However, Tommen explains that the garden was there from the beginning, and they did not touch it at all, leading him to realize that he was wrong. Changing the topic, Hyun-sung shows them the ring he is wearing, stating that they pledged their loyalty to him in front of this ring, and they agree. Therefore, he directly comes to the point and tells them to revert the tax rate to what it was back in his father's time in all of the towns. This decision shocks both Nose and Tommen argues that he cannot make such a critical decision without even consulting them. However, Hyun-sung states that the people are forced to work in their mines, where they die, stating that a change is necessary in such a situation. However, Tommen continues to argue, stating that it is all for his sake since, as long as he is indebted to Lord Banin, they have to do all this. Therefore, he considers it in the best interest of Hyun-sung, as well as his land, to get rid of the debt as soon as possible. Hyun-sung highlights that despite increasing the taxes this much, the amount of debt is still the same, which shows that someone is being dishonest, leading Tommen to feel nervous. After a while, Tommen asks if he is suspecting him, and he declines, stating that he went to great lengths to get him precious medicine. However, Hyun-sung says that he is not pleased with the current situation and considers handling the complaints of the citizens to be the first priority, dealing with the issue of debt later. However, Tommen states that they have already allocated budgets with higher tax rates in place and cannot destroy the entire system that has been built over the years, based on a suspicion. Hearing that, Hyun-sung becomes serious and asks if Tommen is going to disregard his command, but Tommen states that the current tax rate was approved with his permission. Tommen states that his memory lost is making it difficult for him to make sound decisions at the moment. After hearing what Tommen thinks, Hyun-sung turns to Nose, asking about his opinion on whatever Tommen has stated. In response, Nose says that if the Lord wishes the taxes to be decreased, then he will quietly follow the orders, enraging Tommen. Considering that Nose understands his thoughts, Hyun-sung approves the decision while Tommen keeps arguing that he is the financier and Hyun-sung must trust him. While he keeps insisting that it is time for another tax hike, Hyun-sung ignores his words and states that he is tired and will return to the castle. After that, he moves out of the building and goes towards the carriage. However, before getting inside the carriage, he calls out to Nose and tells him to try to convince Tommen, and Nose assures him that he will try his best. After that, he gets inside the carriage and calls out to Tommen, stating that he might summon him at night again. Hardly controlling his anger, Tommen complies with his orders. With that, the carriage starts to move away while Tommen keeps standing still, overwhelmed with anger at Hyun-sung. While he is sitting inside the carriage, Blanzor appears, inquiring what he intends to do with Tommen. In response, he says that he needs to teach him a lesson, stating that Tommen does not have any conscience and has been so bold to steal so much. Blanzor laughs in response, highlighting that he himself has completely taken over the Lord's body and authority and asking how much of a conscience he has. Stating that he has not done it willingly, Hyun-sung says that he needs to rest a little since he has to attend to important matters at night and tells her to keep quiet. Meanwhile, back at the office building, Tommen starts to vent his anger by destroying the entire garden with his sword. Looking at the garden, Nose remarks that he has destroyed 100 years of grooming in a few moments. Turning to Nose, Tommen asks why he is taking the Lord's side, stating that he thought him to be on his side. In response, Nose reveals that he is surely on Tommen's side, but the Lord was making sense, leaving him confused. Nose reveals that the village chief has been voicing their concerns frequently, stating that the tax hike is affecting their residents, so it is time for them to loosen the ropes a little. In response, Tommen states that even in the event of a revolt, they could burn down a town and set it as an example for others, and he wonders why Nose fears such a scenario. However, Nose argues that they should be content with what they have achieved thus far and let it be. Yet Tommen refuses to acknowledge this. Nose emphasizes that the Lord came all the way there to secure their agreement, stating that it is not right for a good subordinate to keep rejecting the Lord's orders. This statement frustrates Tommen, who asks when Nose became the Lord's subordinate, yet Nose asserts that he has always been the Lord's subordinate. Tommen shows indifference and proclaims that he will not comply with the order to lower the taxes, regardless of the consequences. Upon hearing this, Nose advises him to do as he pleases, but warns him that if the captain of the guard returns and the Lord decides to take action against him, Tommen will not be able to handle it. This makes Tommen anxious, while Nose turns away, stating that Tommen will soon witness the impact of his stubbornness. Tommen's anger flares up, blaming Lord Hyun-sung for forcing him to use his whip. That night, while walking in the streets, a person suddenly notices someone standing atop a tall building. However, the person vanishes in the blink of an eye and reappears on the street behind them. Shocked at the person suddenly disappearing from the building, the one standing on the streets begins to lose consciousness when Hyun-sung reaches for him and holds him. After that, he activates his teleportation skill and takes the person away with him. After a few moments, they appear in a different location, and Hyun-sung leaves the person there, disappearing once again, leaving the person surprised. Returning to a rooftop, Hyun-sung removes his mask and turns to Blanzor, praising his abilities. However, she remarks that he is not there to show off. Turning towards the house of the financier, Hyun-sung suggests going there, and they soon reach the roof of the house. Observing the surroundings of the house, Hyun-sung notes that there are no other houses nearby, and Blanzor reveals that they might have been destroyed for security reasons. Noticing the guards, Hyun-sung observes that their armor differs from that of their troops, and Blanzor speculates that they are probably mercenaries. Surprised by this, Hyun-sung wonders whether Tommen sees himself as the lord of the land. Turning to Blanzor, Hyun-sung suggests that, as a spirit, she can go inside and give him a report, which prompts her to ask if he is trying to order her. In response, Hyun-sung smiles, stating that it is not in her best interest for him to die, as she wants him to bring the dragon's eye. Blanzor retorts that she cannot be too far away from the dagger, so he will have to follow her closely as well, and he agrees. Meanwhile, inside the house, Tommen is having his dinner when a person enters and informs him of the arrival of a maid from the castle, and he instructs them to bring her in. After a few moments, the maid arrives and approaches the table. Tommen hands her a bottle, telling her to spread its contents on the Lord's bed. Curious, she asks what it is, and Tommen reveals that they are fleas contaminated with the plague. She expresses concern that if something happens to the Lord, she will be suspected since she looks after his bedroom. However, Tommen orders her to do as directed, reminding her that he was the one who gave her a job in the palace when she was just a street thief. While she trembles with anxiety, Tommen states that if she successfully completes the job, he will help her get out of the castle and grant her freedom. Hearing that, she bows down and states that she will do what he says. Meanwhile, Blanzor, who has been eavesdropping on their conversation, goes back to Hyun-sung, who inquires about her trip. In response, she tells him that the financier has given fleas contaminated by the plague to a maid to put on his bed. Hearing this, Hyun-sung gets surprised and states that if Tommen is going to act as he wishes after being left alone, then he will do the same. Wearing his mask and cape, Hyun-sung asks about the situation of the guards, and she reveals that there are 3 guards in the hallway leading to Tommen's bedroom, which has no window. Realizing they cannot use a window to enter, Hyun-sung decides they will have to go through the hallway to reach the room. With that plan in mind, he jumps down from the roof and reaches the hallway window. Getting inside, he comes face to face with the 3 mercenaries, who inquire about his identity. However, before they can react, he activates teleportation, leaving them shocked. He easily blocks their attacks and counterattacks, knocking 2 of them to the ground. Hyun-sung then turns towards the 3rd guard, who stands with a sword in his hand, and warns him not to enter the room. Asking if it is really the case, Hyun-sung suddenly disappears and appears behind the guard. However, before he can launch an attack, the guard turns to him, attempting to slash him with his sword, which he dodges. Turning to him, the guard states that he cannot bring him down with his little tricks. Confused, Hyun-sung wonders if he only had one surprise attack, and Blanzor starts to laugh, stating that he was very confident in himself and his tricks. He then turns towards the guard, who says that his tricks will not work on him. However, as soon as the guard launches an attack with his sword, Hyun-sung suddenly disappears, surprising him. Just then, Hyun-sung appears from behind and leaps up to launch a surprise attack, causing the guard to crash to the ground. As he defeats the guards, Blanzor informs him that more guards have started to come up. Hearing that, Hyun-sung turns to the door, peers through the keyhole, and finds Tommen hiding behind it, holding his sword and feeling scared. In the next moment, he teleports directly inside the room and attacks Tommen, causing him to fall unconscious. Hae-sung then approaches Taman and activates teleportation, momentarily disappearing while the guards enter the room looking for Taman but do not find him. Turning back, one of the guards expresses his belief that someone was inside the room, while Hyun-sung takes Taman and disappears from the room. After a few moments, Hyun-sung appears in the middle of the forest and starts to drag Taman towards the river, exerting too much effort due to his heavy weight. Putting Taman's face inside the water, Hyun-sung tells him to get up quickly. After a while, Taman regains consciousness and gets up with a jerk, consumed by disbelief and considering it to be impossible. Addressing him, Hyun-sung states that he has asked him too many times to reduce the taxes. He begins to walk towards Taman, telling him to clench his teeth so that they don't fall out, while Taman asks what he intends to do. Reaching near him, Hyun-sung punches him in the face so hard that he crashes into the river. Consumed by overwhelming anger, Taman grabs a stone and throws it in Hyun-sung's direction, stating that he will kill him. However, before he can do that, Hyun-sung launches another punch, causing him to fall again and experience immense pain. Hyun-sung holds the stone in his hand and inquires if it is that easy to kill him, stating that Taman gave fleas contaminated with plague to spread on his bed. The realization that Hyun-sung is aware of the plan leaves Taman shocked. As Taman turns towards him, Hyun-sung throws the stone in his direction, hitting his head and causing him to fall back again. Hyun-sung then puts his foot above Taman and inquires about the reason for his actions, asking if he is so sick of his life. In response, Taman looks up and requests that he spare his life, but Hyun-sung states that it would be much easier to kill him and appoint a new financier. Hearing that, Taman starts to implore for his life, stating that he will become his dog, but Hyun-sung states that no one likes to keep a dog that bites its owner. Holding him by his hair, Hyun-sung puts the knife on his neck, stating that he just wants his life, while Taman speaks up, revealing that he has been stealing from the estate for many years. Stating that he will return all of it, Taman requests that he give him one last chance. Enraged, Hyun-sung states that he cannot try to bargain with him using his own money. In response, Taman says that he is not bargaining but is just asking for his grace and begins imploring again. Hearing that, Hyun-sung sits back at the stone and calls out to Taman. He states that although he does not trust him, he will give him one last chance because he is a graceful lord, leading Taman to thank him. He then inquires about the taxes, and Taman says that he will lower them all right away. Smiling, Hyun-sung states that he should tell everyone that the taxes have been reduced due to the Lord, and Taman agrees. Hyun-sung also orders Taman to send the poor people working in the mines home, and Taman complies. After that, Hyun-sung begins discussing Taman's house, remarking it to be very beautiful, and asks if it is because of their money, and Taman apologizes for that. Hearing that, Hyun-sung orders him to leave that house, stating that since he built it with their money, it belongs to them, and Taman complies. Looking at Taman's expressions, Hyun-sung states that if he thinks of it as unfair, he can simply die, but Taman assures him that this is not the case. After that, he tells Taman to go away, making him feel relieved. However, turning to him, Taman says that he is unaware of how they arrived there and requests that Hyun-sung give him a ride to his home. After a short pause, Hyun-sung tells him to go away in a threatening tone, leading him to start running away. After he leaves, Blanzor appears and asks if Hyun-sung trusts Taman, but he declines. However, he states that since he has scared him, he should be loyal for at least a little while. After that, he gets up from the stone, feeling tired, and teleports back to the castle. Meanwhile, in the castle, the maid enters holding the bottle of fleas in her hands and comes near Hyun-sung's bed. Trembling with anxiety, she contemplates for a while and then opens the bottle to spread the fleas on his bed. However, just then someone puts a hand on her shoulder, causing her to get scared. As she turns back with a jerk, she finds Hyun-sung standing behind her, who asks why she is so startled. Trembling with fear, she states that it is nothing and that she was just leaving the room. After that, she takes her leave and goes towards the door. However, just then Hyun-sung tells her to stop. Coming to her, Hyun-sung states that if the financier tells her to do something next time, she should come to him and instruct her to burn the bottle of fleas in the fire. Feeling shocked and nervous, she agrees and starts to run out of the room when Linda enters holding some books. Turning to Hyun-sung, she asks him for permission to enter, and he grants it. Putting the books on the table, She states that she heard he was going to reduce the taxes by half. He agrees to it, telling her that he will reduce all the taxes throughout his land soon. Surprised to hear that, Linda asks if it is allowed, and Hyun Sung states that he, being the Lord, has the power to do that. In the village at night, Linda stands beside a patient's bed and informs his family that they must make a decision. Looking at the person lying on the bed with a rotten leg, she states that if they do not sever his leg, his whole body will start rotting. In response, the patient's father asks how he will be able to live without one of his feet. However, Linda argues that they must at least try to let him live. She then burns an herb on a plate and brings it near the person, telling him to try to inhale the smoke to ease his pain. Turning to his parents, she states that the effects of the herb will not last long and they have to hurry and decide. His mother responds by stating that they called for her because she was going to heal him for free, not because she would make him disabled. Agreeing, his father states that he would rather die than become a useless member of the family without both his legs. They express their gratitude to her for looking after them, but state that it is their family's decision and ask her to leave. Saying that, they take her out of the house and slam the door behind her, leaving her standing outside the house in disappointment. She thinks that if this continues, the patient might not live to see the next day. Overwhelmed, she thinks that if she had learned the heal touch, she would have been able to heal the patient and wishes that she were a healer who could use force. Thinking that, she begins to move away. The next morning, in the government office, Tommen comes to meet Nose, badly injured and bruised. He tells Nose about everything that happened last night, leaving him in utter disbelief. Tommen states that their lord is very brutal, remembering the look on his face when he was trying to kill him. Shocked, Nose considers it unbelievable, stating that the lord had barely recovered from being bedridden all these years. However, Tommen believes that the lord was lying to them and was completely fine and busy honing his skills in his bedroom while pretending to be sick. Yet Nose states that this cannot be the case since the lord has had a weak constitution since birth, which made the previous lord concerned about him. Remembering that he had to beg for his life in front of the lord, Tommen expresses how upset he is, thinking that he could die. However, Nose states that he had already warned him to be careful, intensifying his frustration. Tommen gives Nose a piece of paper, making him confused, and states that it is the amount that he has given him during all that time and wants him to return it as soon as he can. Shocked to see that, Nose becomes frustrated and inquires about his plans, but Tommen states that he did not mean to ask him for that either. He reveals that he promised the Lord that he would return all the money he has stolen so far. Therefore, since Nose has taken to share, Tommen wants him to share the responsibility with him, making him feel angry. After a few moments, Nose takes a deep breath and agrees to provide him the money, prompting Tommen to thank him. After that, Tommen states that for the matter of taxes, they will go with the Lord's decision as expected by Nose. Feeling remorseful, Tommen reveals that he is going to be kicked out of his own house soon. Hearing that, Nose turns to the door, stating that he is going to leave. Meanwhile, in the castle, Hyun Sung continues his swordsmanship training, practicing different moves and tricks under the guidance of Blanzor. While he keeps training hard, Blanzor looks at him silently. After a long session of tiresome training, Hyun Sung stops, inquiring if she cannot simply teach him the beast sword technique instead. In response, Blanzor states that he will have to practice 1,000 times for that, but Hyun Sung argues that it is useless and only makes his body ache. Hearing that, Blanzor states that he talks a lot, revealing that she used to do it 5,000 times a day when she was only 6 years old. However, Hyun Sung drops the sword and lies down, stating that he cannot do it, prompting Blanzor to criticize his low level of energy and determination. Hearing the criticism, Hyun Sung gets up, saying that he will do it. Holding the sword again, he asks if he has to do it 600 times more, but Blanzor reveals it to be 700. Realizing that she was counting his moves, Hyun Sung takes a deep breath and turns to her, stating that he wants to meet Linda, but she tells him to focus on his training instead. Meanwhile, in the city, Linda walks through the streets while wondering if the patient from last night is still alive. Just then, she notices a fight competition going on and comes to see a person being badly beaten up and lying on the ground, with another one standing victorious. Looking at the winner, Linda feels shocked while the person receives the prize money and goes to a nearby fountain to wash his face. Reaching behind him, Linda inquires if he is all right and he turns around to see her. Turning to her, the person asks if she is there to convince him to cut his ankle again and shows her his foot, which is completely healed, stating that he is fine now. Surprised, she asks how it happened overnight, and the person states that if he had listened to her, he would have spent his entire life being disabled. Coming near him, she applies medicine to his wounds and requests that he tell her how such a severe wound healed completely within one night. Back in her house, Linda is busy looking for something in the small laboratory made by her father. Holding a few tools in her hands, she looks at them, dismissing them all. Just then, Nicarmo arrives, asking what she is looking for. Turning to him, Linda inquires if they have any knives made of silver. Confused, Nicarmo asks what she is trying to do with that, and she states that she wants it for surgery. Hearing that, Nicarmo inquires about the kind of surgery, and after a thought, she states that she wants it for all kinds of surgeries. Shocked, Nicarmo asks about her purpose, and she tells him the truth about a basement dungeon. She reveals that her patient Josh discovered a hermit's inheritance in the dungeon. He discovered a bottle of medicine when he entered the dungeon. However, when he was returning from there, he received an injury to his foot from the attack of the undead, which led him to be cursed by the undead. This caused his foot to get rotten, pushing him slowly towards death, which could have made him one of the undead. However, the bottle of medicine that he brought from the dungeon suddenly fell from his side table and broke. The next day, when he woke up, he found his foot to be completely fine. Under his bed, he found the broken bottle of medicine. However, there was no trace of the medicine to be found. This leads both Nicarmo and Linda to the conclusion that the medicine evaporated in the air and cured him. Hearing that, Nicarmo feels surprised, considering it hard to believe. However, Linda states that she saw it with her own eyes, that the patient who was on the verge of death recovered within a single night. Hearing that, Nicarmo states that if what she is saying is true, then the medicine must be the hermit's inheritance. He then asks Linda about the location of that dungeon. Just then, Josh enters their house, revealing it to be located in the Hearst Mountains. Josh strikes a deal with them, promising that he will receive half of whatever comes out of that place. Later that night, near the soldier camp, Charlene stands in the water when someone asks if he won't be returning to Alberin. Turning, he sees a person wearing a cape who greets him as Sir Jalin. The person then removes his cape and turns out to be Shirel, his past comrade. Coming out of the water, Charlene asks if it's a coincidence or if they came looking for him. Descending from the stone, Shirel questions how much he believes in coincidences, while Charlene compliments that they look much better. He remarks that working for the Grand Lord must be good for Shirel's constitution, and Shirel agrees, stating it's more comfortable than when they were in Alberin. Moving on, Shirel inquires if Charlene has heard the news about King Arthur's illness, leaving him surprised. Shirel explains that the king is in the last stages of his life and asks if Charlene isn't upset, considering their close relationship. Charlene, however, states that the king has lived a natural span of life and there is no need to be upset about it. Shirel mentions a state funeral that could be held within a month, leading Charlene to inquire if they have come to give him a preemptive invitation to the funeral. Shirel clarifies that after the king's death, the whole nation will be watching the succession of the throne, which presents an opportunity for the lords to show their power. Shirel asks if Charlene will not support Lord Bonin in this matter. However, Charlene states that he has become a vassal of the Alberin family. Considering this decision to be a waste of his ability, Shirel suggests he try higher. Shirel reveals that according to the rumors, Prince Tywell will be the one succeeding to the crown after the king, but he is not someone who deserves to be the king. Shirel describes Tywell as the type of person who cruelly throws people in front of wild beasts to be eaten just for fun and has never received a proper princely education. Stating that, Shirel shares their belief that their nation will be destroyed if a person like that becomes king. Shirel tries to convince Charlene, asking if he doesn't want revenge on the prince who scarred his face and pointing out that Alberin will also eventually end up in the war. Walking towards the camp, Charlene declares that if it comes to that, he will enter the battlefield as the head knight of Alberin, following his lord's commands. Back in the castle, Hyun-sung sits at the study table, his hands badly hurting from the endless training, making him unable to write. Just then, Blanzor appears and mocks him for his inability to endure such a basic level of training. Ignoring her, Hyun-sung blows on his hands to relieve the pain and hopes for Linda's arrival, irritating Blanzor. Just then, Rondo asks for permission to enter, and Hyun-sung allows it. Entering the room, Rondo tells him that a young man has arrived at the castle and is demanding to see him. This makes him feel confused, and Rondo reveals that the person wants to see him in regard to Linda. Hearing that, Hyun-sung orders the person to be brought in immediately. Complying, Rondo leaves and returns with the person, who turns out to be Josh. As they enter the room, Hyun-sung asks what Josh wants to say. In response, Josh requests that he save the healer trapped in the dungeon, leaving Hyun-sung shocked. After hearing his request, Hyun-sung inquires if he, Linda, and Nakarmo went inside the dungeon, but he was the only one who successfully escaped. However, Josh states that it is not the case and reveals that they were being chased and had no idea that the dungeon would be that wide with numerous undead monsters. Hearing that, Hyun-sung states that he suspected the monsters to be there but was not expecting the dungeons to exist as well. Agreeing, Rondo states that if what Josh is saying is true, then Linda and Nakarmo might not be alive. Hearing that, Hyun-sung orders Rondo to prepare the soldiers immediately. Taking the order, the person in charge of the soldiers goes to the balcony and tells the Imperial Guards to equip themselves with silver swords, and they comply. Meanwhile, Hyun-sung looks at the sword, thinking that it might not be pure silver. Finding him wearing the armor, Rondo asks if he intends to go with them, and he agrees, stating that it is an important matter. However, Rondo states that his own life is more important than that of Linda and Nakarmo, asking him to leave the mission to the soldiers. Turning to him, Hyun-sung states that he is mistaken about something and reveals that along with saving the healers, they will also have to look for the treasures within the dungeon. Stating that he likes treasures, Hyun-sung reveals his plan to collect tons of them from the dungeon and use them to pay off the debts while also saving the healers. After that, he goes to the balcony and looks at the soldiers standing ready to depart. He announces that he will be the one leading them, encouraging them to become successful, causing the soldiers to stare at him silently. Looking at their reaction, Hyun-sung considers it justified, thinking that if he were in their place, he would have thought of himself as ridiculous. However, he still smiles and turns to the soldiers, threatening them that if they do not answer his commands, they will end up being killed by him. Hearing this, they become even more surprised and start to answer his command loudly, determined to win the battle against the monsters. Glad by their response, Hyun-sung promises to treat them with a drink after they successfully clear the dungeon, which leads them all to become encouraged. Seeing that, Rondo expresses his surprise at the drastic change in the personality of the Lord, and the in-charge agrees. However, he still thinks that they should stop the Lord from going to the dungeon, but Rondo states that the Lord will never listen to them, and the only choice they have is to watch over him. Just then, Hyun-sung turns to them, ordering them to depart. Therefore, they all mount their horses and leave the castle with Hyun-sung, hoping for Linda to be alive. Soon after, they reach Herswit Mountain and climb up a narrow path, following Josh. Looking at Hyun-sung, Josh thinks that he does not look as weak or cowardly as the rumors suggest. Turning to him, the in-charge of the soldiers asks if they are still far away, and he reveals that they will reach them as soon as they cross the ravine. In response, the in-charge says that they should have simply reported to the Lord after discovering the dungeon and got their reward instead of being reckless. However, Josh states that if they had done it, they would have received just a few golds. Frustrated, the in-charge states that if they were that confident, they should have finished what they started instead of relying on the Lord. This leaves Josh speechless, but Hyun-sung reaches them, stating that it also takes a lot of courage to ask for help, and they should just focus on saving the healers for now. Hearing that, Josh quietly starts to move ahead and finally stops in front of a stone chamber, stating that it is the place he was talking about. He reveals that if they go down, there will be a small cave within the stone chamber. He says that they thought it was the whole dungeon, but once they went further in, they saw an underground village. Hearing that, Hyun-sung feels surprised, while Josh explains that it is an abandoned village that also has a moon in the sky. While walking inside, Hyun-sung wonders if it even makes sense for a moon and sky to exist underground. Just then, Blanzor appears, stating that the dungeons that appear in the gap of a cracked world are places where incomprehensible things happen. Turning to Josh, Hyun-sung asks if he split up with Linda and Nakarmo in the underground village, and he agrees, stating that they are probably hiding somewhere in the village. After that, they begin descending the staircase, where they are surprised to find an undead monster guarding the place. As soon as the monster notices them, the soldier in charge throws his sword in its direction, which it manages to block using its shield. Seeing that, Hyun-sung remarks that it is very fast and skilled for something made up of just bones. Blanzor reveals that the undead skeletal soldiers possess way better fighting power as compared to normal soldiers. Just then, the monster removes the shield from in front of it and looks at Hyun-sung, making him shocked. Suddenly, it leaps up towards Hyun-sung, leaving everyone surprised. However, before it can launch an attack, Rondo comes in front of Hyun-sung to protect him. As soon as the monster leaps up to attack Hyun-sung, the soldiers come in front of him and make a protective shield using their armor, blocking its attacks. From within the shields, the soldiers begin to throw their swords at the monster, striking it and causing it to fall down and lose its life. After killing the monster, the soldiers proceed forward, following Josh, while Hyun-sung keeps standing on the staircase, remarking that it is a flashy way to die. Turning to Rondo, he asks if this place was an experimental lab. Blanzor reveals that among the experimenting alchemists who were dangerous and unethical, many of them made use of the secretiveness of a dungeon and set up their bases there. While he is hearing that, Josh takes the remaining soldiers towards one of the walls and pulls it, revealing a secret passageway. Going near the entrance, Hyun-sung decides to take a look and finds countless undead monsters standing inside. Looking at their eyes glowing with fierce intent, Hyun-sung realizes that they are ready to fight and commands his soldiers to eliminate them. Conforming to the order, the soldiers move forward and eliminate them all within a few moments, effortlessly slashing them with their swords. Impressed by their expertise, Hyun-sung appreciates them for their job and then starts to move forward. After entering the underground village, they look at the sky and are shocked to find a moon shining above their heads. Considering it to be unbelievable, Hyun-sung remarks that he feels like looking at a different world. Just then, Josh points to the village on his right side, revealing it to be the place where he lost the healers. Meanwhile, in the village, an undead monster walks in the streets, and Linda and Nekarmo look at him from a nearby building. Hiding inside the building, Nekarmo wonders why the monster is continuously following them. In response, Linda states that it is because Nekarmo crushed its knees with rocks. Just then, the monster comes near the window, making them realize that it has found them. Turning to Linda, Nekarmo says that he will go down to attract the monster's attention, telling her to escape in the meantime. In response, Linda states that she was the one who brought him there and says that if they combine their strength, they can defeat the monsters, telling her father not to be weak. Hearing that, Nekarmo decides to fight together, feeling determined to get out of the place alive. Stating that they only have one chance, he tells Linda to cut it down with the silver dagger while he blocks its axe. After that, they emerge from the building, expecting to encounter only one monster. However, to their surprise, countless monsters start gathering at the place, even on the roofs, surrounding them from all directions. Meanwhile, Hyun-sung gazes at the village and turns to Rondo, asking if he fires an arrow in the sky, is there a chance for the healer to reach them, or will the monsters come? In response, Rondo states that the closer side will probably come first. Agreeing with this assumption, Hyun-sung orders the soldiers to proceed, and they start setting their arrows on fire. Meanwhile, Linda and Nekarmo keep fighting against the monsters that throw their axes, breaking the only wooden shield they have. After that, the monster is about to kill Nekarmo with its axe when Linda arrives from behind and strikes the monster with the silver dagger, causing it to die. However, they soon become surrounded by countless monsters that begin to approach them, making them realize that there is no end to them. Remembering Hyun-sung, Linda feels sad but thinks that he will eventually learn to read and write even without her assistance. However, just then, countless arrows, lit with fire, start to ascend to the sky, leaving both the monsters and the healers surprised. Suddenly, the monsters lead them there and start to rush in the direction of the arrows. Looking at the monsters approaching them from a distance, Hyun-sung smiles, thinking his plan is successful. Turning to the soldiers, he commands them to take care of the monsters, and they rush to comply. Meanwhile, Linda and Nekarmo also reach the place and find the soldiers fighting against the monsters, with Hyun-sung standing behind them. Looking at him, Linda becomes overwhelmed, realizing that the Lord has personally come to rescue them. Observing the fierce battle between the soldiers and the monsters, Hyun-sung realizes that the monsters outnumber them and will soon overpower the soldiers. Therefore, he tells Rondo that they will be joining the fight, commanding him to follow. Shocked, Rondo forbids him from doing that, but Hyun-sung uses teleportation to disappear in front of him and appear in the middle of the battleground, leaving Rondo shocked. Concerned, Rondo runs towards him, requesting him to stop, while Hyun-sung states that if they want to survive, they should start fighting, calling it an order. With that, he moves forward, slashing the monsters with consecutive switch strikes. Just then, one of the monsters leaps up to attack him from behind, leaving him confused. Without a second thought, he strikes the monster and teleports to a different location. Seeing that, Blanzor states that his use of abilities, which he wanted to keep hidden, shows how desperate he is. However, Hyun-sung states that he wouldn't care about hiding anything in a situation where he could die and considers it a difficult task to groom new elite soldiers. While he is busy talking, another monster comes from behind and launches an attack on him, causing him to get injured. However, before the monster can launch a second attack, he teleports onto its back and pierces his sword through its body. Turning to Blanzor, he states that he got hurt because of her, forbidding her from talking to him in the middle of the fight. Feeling enraged, Hyun-sung continues to slay the monsters endlessly, remarking that despite being the escort of the emperor, Blanzor is totally useless in fights. Looking at him, the in charge of the soldiers wonders since when the lord became that strong. Turning to Rondo, he inquires if it is really their lord, and Rondo agrees. Hearing that, he smiles and raises his sword, commanding his soldiers to be steadfast and stating that their lord is also fighting with them. Hearing that, the soldiers become motivated and begin to fight the monsters with newfound determination and confidence. After some time, Hyun-sung takes a deep breath, thinking that they are starting to see the end of things. Just then, Rondo comes running to him, asking if he is all right, and he agrees. Looking at the wound on his shoulder, Rondo states that he is injured and considers it to be his fault. However, Hyun-sung tells him not to worry about it, stating that it is normal for people to get injured during a fight. Meanwhile, Blanzor looks up into the sky with surprise, remarking that she never thought it would appear in such a place. Hearing that, Hyun-sung also looks up to find a shadow of a warrior on a horse in front of the moon. Turning to him, Blanzor tells him to escape the place quickly, stating that they cannot win against it with their current abilities, prompting him to ask what it is. In response, she reveals that it is the undead knight who is the subordinate of the ancient dragon that became an evil spirit wandering in dungeons. While he shares his surprise at hearing about it, Blanzor tells him to quickly dodge when a black mist suddenly begins to surround them, making their vision blurry. Unable to see them, Hyun-sung calls out to Rondo, asking if he can hear him. However, Blanzor tells him to stop shouting and states that the undead knight has started to rule over this place, and even if he has to escape alone, he should do it. Remembering how he lost his best friend in his old life, Hyun-sung turns to her and states that he would never make a decision to abandon his subordinates. Frustrated at this decision, Blanzor asks if he wants to die there, urging him to think about his future. Hearing that, Hyun-sung states that his future lies in this very place at the moment and turns his back on Blanzor. Looking at the darkness spreading in his surroundings, Hyun-sung thinks that he cannot use teleportation without seeing anything, and if he gets attacked, he will die. Just then, Blanzor tells him to look above him, and he looks in that direction and manages to block the sudden attack launched by the undead knight. However, with the impact of the attack, his silver sword breaks into pieces, leaving him disappointed. After that, the clouds of darkness dissipate, exposing him to the undead knight sitting on a formidable horse. Looking at it, Blanzor remarks that he might have been lucky, but it will not be the same the next time, urging him to run away quickly. Just then, the undead knight unleashes its formidable weapon and disappears in front of Hyun-sung, leaving him bewildered. Suddenly, it appears behind him and raises its weapon to strike Hyun-sung, causing Blanzor to call out to him in worry. Considering it a good chance, Hyun-sung uses the teleportation skill to disappear, leaving the undead knight bewildered. Confused, it looks around when Hyun-sung suddenly appears above its head and comes down holding his broken sword. Reaching near the knight, Hyun-sung asks if it was looking for him, causing the knight to turn back in confusion. Seeing him, the knight turns his horse in his direction and starts to leap up to attack him. As soon as the knight reaches up to him and launches an attack, Hyun-sung disappears again and appears behind him on the ground. Taking a stone in his hand, Hyun-sung turns to the knight and throws the stone in its direction, hitting its head. Watching that, Blanzor inquires why he is provoking the knight, but Hyun-sung reveals that he was scared that it might go after his soldiers. Turning to him, the knight begins to rush in his direction, but before it can reach him, he teleports again, appearing behind the knight. Calling out to it, Hyun-sung states that they should fight for real and begins to run away, followed by the knight. Seeing them move away, the soldiers feel confused and surprised. Observing the intense battle from a distance, Rondo begins to worry about Hyun-sung's well-being. Linda and Nakarmo also witness the battle with surprise, while Hyun-sung continues to fight against the formidable knight. Looking at the skill level of Hyun-sung, Nakarmo becomes shocked, unable to believe his eyes. At the same time, Hyun-sung, struggling to defend against the knight's attacks, thinks that he has pushed his teleportation skill beyond its limits, feeling sluggish as a result. Witnessing the knight's relentless display of power and energy, Hyun-sung teleports again, thinking that he needs to hide first. Appearing behind a large stone, he wonders if the knight ever tires. Blanzor explains that the knight is already dead and cannot be defeated merely by hiding, to which Hyun-sung agrees. He reflects on the knight's strength, noticing his broken sword, but Blanzor points out that he should have run away if he lacked confidence in winning. Thinking he can only use teleportation 3 more times, Hyun-sung suddenly hears a sound and looks in that direction, finding his soldiers rushing towards the undead knight. Rondo declares their intention to help the lord and launches an attack that the undead knight manages to block. As a result of the attack, the undead knight becomes enraged and counters with a massive attack, causing Rondo to crash to the ground and cough up blood. Just then, the soldier in charge attacks it from behind, but he too is met with a fierce counterattack, leaving him badly injured. Witnessing this, other soldiers join the battle and start to charge at the undead knight, shocking Hyun-sung. As the soldiers approach, the knight slashes them down. Blanzor remarks that he surely has loyal subordinates and suggests that Hyun-sung should retreat while they buy him time, frustrating him. He turns away from Blanzor and focuses on the monster, noticing Linda and Nakarmo standing on the balcony. While he gazes at Linda, Blanzor asks if he is still going to hesitate, stating that she has made a contract with a pathetic person like him to get rid of the dragon's eye. In response, Hyun-sung forbids her from being harsh on him, stating that he is nervous and smiles. Holding his sword, he states that he has thought about the position he is in and what he needs to protect and pay back. Thinking that he has overcome such extreme situations in the past as well, he wields force with his sword, stating that he is going to win this battle as well. Blanzor is shocked to see that he has finally learned to use force. Emerging from his hiding place, Hyun-sung faces the undead knight with the broken sword in hand. Seeing him, Rondo becomes surprised, while Blanzor thinks that, despite being weak in concentration, it is indeed the force that he is wielding. Turning to Hyun-sung, she asks what is going on, stating that she has not seen him practicing it, and he agrees, stating that it is his first time using it. This makes her feel shocked, while Hyun-sung tells her to keep quiet, stating that the knight is coming. Meanwhile, the knight rushes towards him at great speed. Just then, the knight attempts to attack him, but Hyun-sung narrowly evades. Seeing that, Blanzor suggests that despite wielding force, Hyun-sung might not last long against such an opponent, and he agrees. Anticipating that a head-on confrontation would be too much, Hyun-sung decides to employ another strategy and waits for the monster to rush in. Seeing him standing still, Blanzor asks about his strategy while the other soldiers gaze at him in surprise. Just then, the knight reaches for him and launches an attack, causing him to experience immense pain. However, gathering courage and strength, he leaps up, holding his sword, and looks at the knight. Bewildered, the knight follows him upwards, making Blanzor realize that Hyun-sung was not trying to teleport but to lead the undead knight's attack. Turning to Rondo, Hyun-sung asks him to throw his sword at him, and he complies. Catching the sword, he turns to the undead knight with fierce intent in his eyes and charges at it with all his might, launching a precise strike. After some time, in the village that now seems empty, Hyun-sung lies unconscious, having received first aid for his injuries. After a while, he opens his eyes to find Rondo, Linda, and Josh around him. Linda helps him get up, and he expresses his happiness at her being all right. In response, she thanks him for saving her and for being alive himself and begins to cry. Telling her not to cry, he asks if she treated his injuries, but she states that it was done by her father. Remembering her father, Hyun-sung asks where he is, and she reveals that he is treating other soldiers at the moment. Turning to Rondo, he asks for a report on the damages received by their soldiers, and Rondo reveals the number of soldiers with fatal and minor injuries. When asked about casualties, Rondo reveals that no one has died, and even those who received injuries are not in critical states, making him feel relieved. Linda states that it is all her fault and says that she is ready to receive any punishment the Lord gives her. Hearing that, Josh speaks up, stating that it is his fault for not turning without getting a proper grasp of the situation. Turning to Linda, Hyun-sung states that he heard from Josh that she entered the dungeon in search of evidence of an incredible medicine and asks if she has found it. In response, Josh states that they did find something, and Linda reveals it to be an ancient text in the stone chamber near the dungeon entrance. She states that some parts of it were damaged, and the ancient text also needs to be translated. Josh reveals that there was an elixir that healed his rotten leg, and if they can make that medicine, it would be very beneficial. Hearing that, Hyun-sung asks if they need to interpret the ancient text for that. In response, Linda states that because of the effectiveness of the medicine, it is worth the research and asks that you allow her some time to interpret the text and try to make the medicine. Hearing that, Hyun-sung decides to allow her, considering that she is very insistent on doing that, and she becomes glad, stating that she will surely make it no matter what. Hearing that, Hyun-sung asks Linda to help Nakarmo treat the soldiers, and she complies. Turning to the rest of the soldiers, he orders them to look for treasures in the village, stating that they cannot leave empty-handed from a dungeon. With that, they excitedly started their search for treasure. However, even after searching the entire village, they are unable to find anything, making Hyun-sung feel disappointed. While Blanzor keeps laughing at him, Hyun-sung becomes sad, thinking that he was hoping to improve their financial conditions, but it seems like they have fallen into the depths of despair. Just then, Rondo arrives, stating that they have completed the preparations to return to the castle. Hearing that, Hyun-sung decides to return, thinking that they should be thankful for at least being alive. With that, they begin to move towards the entrance, with all of them feeling proud to be the subordinates of a powerful person like Hyun-sung. The next morning, in the garden, Hyun-sung lies down, closing his eyes. While Blanzor keeps telling him to start the training, he dismisses it, stating that he is feeling drowsy. Just then, he feels a shadow above him and opens his eyes to find Rondo, who informs him that the financier is waiting for him in the office. Stating that he does not want to move, Hyun-sung tells Rondo to ask the financier to come to the garden, and he complies. After a few moments, Tommen descends the stairs, feeling frustrated at climbing all these stairs to reach the top of the castle, only to be told to come back again. He feels annoyed, thinking that his knee is already in bad shape, yet the Lord is still treating him like a dog. After some time, he reaches the garden and finds Hyun-sung lying on the ground. Turning to him, Hyun-sung remarks that the sunlight is so nice for him to move in, but Tommen says it is okay. Turning to Rondo, Hyun-sung states that he wants to speak to the financier in private, and Rondo complies and moves away. He then turns back to Tommen and states that he was very shocked when he went to the basement last night, prompting Tommen to ask if something happened in the basement. In response, Hyun-sung reveals that the safe in the basement was completely empty. Reminding him of the promise he made, Hyun-sung states that he should have returned all the money he stole as long as he let him live. Hyun-sung asks what he was up to when his lord was fighting against the deadly monsters in the dungeon. In response, Tommen states that the money is spread out among various assets and that it is taking him time to collect it all, apologizing for that. Hearing that, Hyun-sung remarks that if anyone else heard him, they might think that he is stealing money that originally belonged to him, and Tommen agrees. Stating that looking at the empty safe makes him think of killing him and appointing a new financier, Hyun-sung warns Tommen to quickly return the money when asked nicely. Looking at Tommen's expressions, Hyun-sung inquires if he thinks it's unfair, but Tommen disagrees. Hyun-sung then states that he was told by the administrator that the residents are all overjoyed at the tax rates going down. Hyun-sung expresses his frustration, asking if Tommen is aware that the people have very negative opinions of their lord just because of a financier like him. Therefore, he wants him to be like Nose and do at least half the work he does, leaving him surprised. Hearing that, Tommen calls it unfair and states that the administrator is equally corrupt as him, and he is not the only one being dishonest in his job. Tommen reveals that he was able to steal money only with the help of the administrator, and the village chief also has closer relations with the administrator than him. In response, Hyun-sung states that he knows about it, revealing that the administrator came to him last night and confessed everything he has done. Hyun-sung says that the administrator told him about the amount he took from Tommen and promised to return it all to him. After that, he tells Tommen to go, and he complies and walks away. While walking out of the garden, Tommen feels shocked and enraged at the sudden shift in No's attitude. However, he hopes it will end soon, thinking that when the old king dies, the whole nation will be in an uproar trying to decide the next candidate for the throne. He thinks that their young lord will not be able to defend his position amidst all this chaos. A few days later, in the castle, Hyun-sung continues to take his language classes from Linda. While practicing how to write, Hyun-sung calls out to her, saying that he does not understand the meaning of a particular part of the book. Hearing that, she comes to the table and asks which part it is. As she comes closer, Hyun-sung thinks that she smells like flowers. After reading that part, she reveals that it is an idiom, reminding him about what she wrote down for him to memorize last time, and he says that he remembers it. Turning to her, Hyun-sung thanks her, stating that his reading and writing skills have improved quite a lot because of her, which makes her feel glad. He states that he wants to give her a token of appreciation and asks if there is anything she needs. In response, she states that there is something she wants to ask from him, and he inquires what it is. She reveals that she is having a difficult time trying to decipher the ancient text from the dungeon. She states that this is not something that she can solve just by having more time and requests to have an ancient language expert who is experienced. She says that there is a person like that in their land and wants Hyun-sung to summon them. Feeling confused, Hyun-sung asks where the person is currently. In response, she reveals that he is currently in prison for fraud. Linda states that according to her father, even though the person is a common, his knowledge of ancient languages is incomparable. She reveals that at one point in time, he was an ancient language expert and was studying as a scholar at the royal palace, prompting Hyun-sung to ask what his name is. In response, she reveals that it is alchemist Kane. Meanwhile, in the prison, a strong-looking person does tiresome work under the supervision of the soldiers. While he is pulling a trolley full of tree logs, another prisoner attacks him from behind, stating that this is their revenge for yesterday. Enraged by that, the person uses his bare hand to knock the prisoner to the ground, leading them to fall unconscious. After doing that, he states that if they are not prepared to kill him, they should not challenge him. Just then, someone calls out to him, addressing him as Kane, and he turns around to see the guards, telling him to put the stick down immediately. Hearing that, he silently throws the stick away, but the guards suddenly attack him and begin to beat him up with their sticks. After some time, while the other prisoners are sitting down to rest, Kane takes off his shirt and chews the tree leaves, making a paste that he applies to his wounds. While he is doing that, someone calls out to him again, and he turns around to see a guard, telling him to get in the carriage, stating that there is somewhere he needs to go. Meanwhile, Hyun-sung sits in his office when the administrator informs him that the captain of the guard has left the village and is heading towards the castle. Feeling excited to hear the news, he calls it great and states that he should reward them as soon as they come back. While Hyun-sung considers it a great accomplishment to win against 400 thieves, the administrator states that there is something that bothers him. Confused, Hyun-sung asks what it is, and the administrator reveals that the captain made a mistake by chasing the group of thieves past the Scarlet Canyon into the land of Lobelong. The administrator reveals that the Lord of Lobelong is someone who has always been after their land, and he fears that this may have provided a good reason for them to invade their land. Considering that the thieves would have committed crimes in Lobelong, Hyun-sung states that they have helped Lobelong by doing that. However, the administrator states that the Lord of Lobelong is not someone who takes care of his people. He says that if they fight against Lobelong, their strong military will lead the residents of Alberon to suffer greatly and consider it beneficial to avoid the war at all costs. Understanding that, Hyun-sung asks what to do, inquiring if he will need to kneel down and ask for forgiveness. In response, the administrator suggests sending a messenger with adequate compensation. Surprised, Hyun-sung asks how much compensation they'll have to send, In response, Nose says that it should be at least 20,000 gold, leaving him shocked. Nose explains that the amount has to be this much to ensure that they do not damage the pride of the Lord, and Hyun-sung tells him to ask the financer to deal with it. After he leaves, Hyun-sung rests his back on the chair, thinking that he will have to forget about rewarding the soldiers in that case. Just then, Rondo enters, informing him that the prisoner has arrived, and Hyun-sung asks to bring him in. After a few moments, Kane is brought into the room and is made to kneel down in front of Hyun-sung. Telling him to raise his head, Hyun-sung goes towards him, stating that he has heard of him being an ancient language expert, and he agrees. After that, Hyun-sung inquires why he lied 4 years ago to the merchant, saying that he could make a stone golem. In response, Kane states that he did not lie and that he truly believed that he could make it. Hearing that, Hyun-sung asks why he was not able to make it, stating that the merchant trusted him and invested a lot of money only for it to fail. In response, Kane lowers his head, stating that mistakes have to be made in order to succeed, and even though his experiment failed, he did not lie. Considering that, Hyun-sung asks about the golem that he claimed to make, and Kane reveals that a golem is an object that can fight and work like a human despite not being a human. He explains that it does not eat or sleep, but can work tirelessly as well as defend a castle or fight against monsters. Hearing that, Hyun-sung feels surprised, while Kane states that if those objects are made, they can change the world. Hearing his claims, Hyun-sung realizes that he is actually talking about making a robot. Considering that, he turns to Kane again and asks if he can really make that using magic, but Kane explains that it is alchemy, not magic. He states that everything in this world can be changed into an alternative object, and his research in alchemy makes this possible. Kane reveals that a few alchemists have actually made golems before by figuring out the golden ratio of elements that change the form of the objects. Saying that, he reveals that he was also close to figuring out the elemental ratio in his experiment. Hearing that, Hyun-sung turns to Blanzor and asks if she thinks it's real. In response, Blanzor calls him an imbecile for being swayed by such words. However, she states that his claims are not wrong, revealing that the ancient alchemists had the ability to manipulate objects into other forms. Turning to Kane, Hyun-sung states that he was sentenced to 10 years of prison, out of which 6 are still left, so he wants to propose something. Hyun-sung reveals that they found an ancient text from the dungeon that he can translate. He states that if Kane succeeds with the translation, his remaining imprisonment will be dismissed and he will be freed, asking if he wants to avail himself of that opportunity. In response, Kane agrees to do it, and Hyun-sung orders Rondo to unbind his shackles and bring him to Nakarmo. After some time in Linda's house, Kane indulges in endless eating while Linda, Nakarmo, and Josh gaze at him, telling him to take his time. While continuously eating, Kane asks if they recommended him to the Lord, and they agree, prompting him to inquire how they knew about him. In response, Nakarmo reveals that a long time ago, his friend, who was working at the royal palace, sought his help in translating an ancient medical document. Upon hearing that, Kane states that he remembers it and admits that he devoted all his spare time to translating that document, but the person shamelessly insisted on cutting the prices in half. Due to that attitude, he did not translate the document properly, rendering it useless. Saying this, he tells Nakarmo to convey to his friend that such consequences happen when one steals from a poor scholar. However, in response, Nakarmo reveals that his friend has already passed away, leaving Kane shocked. After a short pause, Kane states that he is sorry to hear that. In return, Nakarmo states that he is also sorry to see a great scholar like Kane reduced to a prisoner. Nevertheless, Kane reassures him not to worry, stating that he will complete the task assigned to him by the Lord and become a free man soon. He then asks where the text is, and Linda brings it to him. After skimming it, Kane reveals that the text is written in the language used briefly in the ancient region of Bradkus. He also claims that he can discern what kind of medicine this experiment produces. Surprised, Nakarmo confirms that they were indeed searching for a potion. However, Kane points out that since the text is damaged, it would not be easy to produce the potion with just this. Upon hearing that, Linda requests that he translate it in any way he can, as she and her father must make this medicine. In response, Kane claims to feel sleepy after eating too much, frustrating Linda. Nevertheless, since they have no other choice, Josh takes Kane upstairs to a room and suggests that he can share the room with him temporarily. As they prepare to rest, Kane asks if Josh is part of this family, remarking that he does not look similar to them. In response, Josh reveals that he was abandoned by his own family and they took him in. Kane calls them nice people and gets on the bed, to which Josh angrily tells him to get off, stating that it is his place. However, Kane insists that he has slept on the ground for many years and asks Josh to let him sleep there for the night. In response, Josh points out that Kane speaks too roughly to be a scholar and does not make a good impression either. Kane counters by saying that Josh is too rough to be studying medicine under a healer with an equally bad impression. Hearing that, Josh informs him that he is popularly known as a fighter in the village. Kane suggests that if he does not have anywhere to go, he can learn alchemy, which prompts Josh to ask if Kane wants him to become a con artist like him. In response, Kane states that today's truth might be tomorrow's lie, and tomorrow's lie might be an incredulous truth the next day. However, Josh seems not to understand such philosophical words and asks what they even mean. Just then, on a large tower nearby, a faint light begins to glow, followed by the appearance of Hyun-sung. Standing above the roof, Hyun-sung decides to lead the city and embark on adventures in faraway areas. He uses his teleportation ability to travel above the roofs of houses. He thinks that due to an increase in his strength, it does not bother him as much to travel longer distances at once. Therefore, he leaves the city behind and reaches the mountains. As he stands above the mountain, Blanzor states that he has already come a long way, asking how far he intends to go. In response, Hyun-sung reveals that he wants to travel until he can see the ocean and takes out a map, stating that the Southern Dominion is close to the ocean. Stating that they have already come this far, Hyun-sung expresses his desire to enjoy the sea breeze. So he jumps down the mountain into the sea, where a large ship is moving in the water far away from them. As the ship reaches the corner of the sea, numerous slave drivers come out of it and stand before their leader, who states that their slave hunting for that day is going to be very good. The leader states that Alberin has the weakest defenses of all the places they have hunted and decides to show the Lord how wrong his decision to cut down his defenses was. He tells his subordinates that slaves are money, and if they begin to fulfill their desires by tarnishing the product, they will end up as shark bait. In response, his subordinates state that this is not their first time doing it, making him feel glad, and he tells them to go and start their job. Just then, his daughter calls out to him from behind. Hearing her voice, he asks where she has been, stating that he told her that these people would become her subordinates one day, so she should avoid being so distant. However, his daughter states that she has a better plan and suggests that instead of kidnapping just the slaves, they should capture the Lord from the Alberin castle. Hearing that, her father stops her from saying such nonsense, stating that although there might not be many soldiers, they will be obliterated by them on the way to the castle. Adding to this, he states that the royal palace knight, Charlene, is also on standby. However, she states that she will deal with him herself, shocking her father. Turning aside, her father states that she cannot gamble like that when she is the captain of the slave drivers. In response, she argues that if they kill Charlene, they will gain fame, but her father states that gaining fame will only lead them to gain more enemies. Stating that they are already making tons of money through slave driving, her father asks what else she wants. In response, she states that she wants to be known as a swordsman and not a slave driver, stating that even her father acknowledged her skills. Hearing that, her father becomes surprised and tells her not to rush things too much, stating that she will soon become one of the top swordsmen on the continent of Donsylvania. He states that he has invested too much in making her into a top swordsman, but she replies that a sword that does not fight does not improve, which is what her master has told her. Stating that, she begins to move away while her father keeps calling her from behind, addressing her as Tazy. Meanwhile, Hyun-sung appears on a cliff, enjoying the sea breeze, and remarks that it would have been even better if he had come there during the day. Blanzor also appears on the cliff, and he states that he would have brought his vacation home to such a place so that he could come there with his family and play on the beach. Hearing that, Blanzor states that his dreams are very small and he should have a bigger ambition. In response, Hyun-sung states that having a family is her biggest ambition, if she understands. However, Blanzor urges him to use his head, stating that as long as he is the Lord, he will always be the object of someone's ambition. Hearing this, Hyun-sung states that he will surely fight, considering that when he lived on Earth, he lost his family and everything he had and does not want to lose any more. After staying silent for a moment, Hyun-sung turns to Blanzor, stating that they should go back to the castle since they have had a little rest. However, just as they are about to leave, they notice a fire burning at a distance and think that a nearby village is on fire. While Blanzor states that they will get water from the ocean and put it out, Hyun-sung states that she should not act nonchalantly just because it is not her problem. Stating that it is his land and his village, he disappears from the cliff and soon appears in the village, realizing that the village is under attack by slave drivers. Laughing, one of them tells the others to collect all the treasure, tie people up, and take their children away. Watching all this, Hyun-sung feels shocked as memories of his past life flood back. He recalls a time when his city was attacked by monsters, and he tried to escape with his sister. Unfortunately, she fell and was captured by the monsters, who ultimately killed her. Remembering his powerlessness at that time, Hyun-sung becomes enraged, asking how they dare think of the village as their hunting ground. Asking how they dared to come on his land, Hyun-sung pulls out his dagger, stating that today is the end of them. Just then, one of the slave drivers approaches him from behind and asks if he wants to become a slave as well. Enraged, Hyun-sung quickly teleports to the back of the person and swiftly cuts his throat with his dagger. Witnessing this, the other slave drivers become attentive and decide to capture him. Just then, one of them reaches behind him and grabs him, stating that they have already captured him. The person threatens to break his back, but suddenly, both Hyun-sung and the captor disappear, leaving the other slave drivers shocked. After a while, Hyun-sung reappears at a different location, shocking the person as he looks at the house in front of him. After setting the entire village on fire, the remaining slave drivers look around, wondering where he went. Suddenly, Hyun-sung appears behind one of them, holding a scythe, and states that the blacksmith wants all of them to be beheaded. Saying that, he comes into action and swiftly kills all of them with precise attacks. However, while he is doing so, one of the slave drivers manages to attack him from behind, injuring him. Enraged, Hyun-sung quickly turns around and slashes the scythe on the attacker's neck, killing him instantly. After successfully killing all of them, he stands holding the blood-stained scythe when Blanzor remarks that he still has a long way to go in order to learn. Turning to her, Hyun-sung asks why she didn't warn him of the attack, but she states that he should be happy about at least getting rid of all the slave drivers. After that, he reaches for the people who are tied up with ropes and helps them get free. As he unties the people, they express their gratitude for his help. In response, he asks the villagers about the identity of the attackers. The people reveal that they were the henchmen of the slave driver Crom, who is a horrendous person who kidnaps and sells innocent people as slaves. Stating that he will rescue the remaining people, Hyun-sung tells the villagers to put out the fire in the meantime and disappears from their sight. Meanwhile, near the ship, the remaining slave drivers supervise the loading of the slaves onto the ship. While watching that, their leader thinks about his daughter and hopes she has not gone to the Overbearing castle to fight Charlene. Remembering her desire to become a swordsman rather than a slave driver, he considers her to be very ungrateful for what she has. Just then, one of his subordinates calls out to him, asking him to look in a particular direction. As he looks there, he sees a shadow emerging from the forest and thinks it might be his daughter. So he happily runs towards the shadow, stating that she will have many more opportunities in the future. However, as soon as he reaches her, he is shocked to find that it is not his daughter but Hyun-sung. Confused, Crom asks who he is. In response, Hyun-sung asks if he is Crom, the human trafficker who roams around the greatest continent and attacks villages on the coastline. Hearing that, the other slave drivers draw their swords and ask who he is. Suddenly, Hyun-sung becomes invisible and attacks them all with remarkable speed. Finally, he appears behind Crom, who stands in shock at what he witnessed. Standing behind Crom, Hyun-sung states that around 40 villagers appear to have been sacrificed. Confused, Crom inquires about his subordinates, and Hyun-sung reveals that they are all dead. Considering it impossible, Crom rushes towards him with a dagger in his hand. Meanwhile, Hyun-sung clenches his fist, disappears, and reappears near Crom, delivering a powerful punch to his face. Holding Crom by his clothes, Hyun-sung tells him that he has only received a single blow and should prepare for more. He proceeds to beat Crom fiercely, questioning if he had nothing better to do in life than human trafficking. Meanwhile, the captured villagers watch everything with surprise. After some time, Crom falls unconscious from the hard hits. Saying that Crom cannot pass out so easily, Hyun-sung drags him and submerges him in the water, urging him to open his eyes. After a while, Crom regains consciousness and jerks himself up, but Hyun-sung states that he cannot die so easily because it would be in his favor. Crom pleads to be spared, promising never to do it again. However, Hyun-sung ignores his words, takes an oar, and strikes him with all his might. Sometime later, he appears on the boat holding Crom and throws him inside. He then begins to untie the villagers, who thank him for his favor. Stating that they will never be able to repay him, one of them asks for his name. After a short pause, he reveals his name as Hyun-sung, his original name from his previous life. He explains that he is the shadow of the Lord of Alberan and that the Lord will sell the ship to help them recover their village, so they must take care of it. He advises the villagers to keep an eye on Crom, as the Lord will soon send someone to take him. At that moment, Blanzor appears behind him and informs him that he is bleeding. Telling her to be quiet, he turns to the villagers, wishes them a safe journey home, and disappears from their sight, leaving them shocked and confused. After vanishing from the boat, Hyun-sung appears in front of Linda's house, surprising her as she opens the door. Laughing at her startled reaction, he explains that he wanted her to see a wound. Hearing that, she takes him inside and looks at the serious wound he received, becoming shocked. After cleaning the wound, she gives him an herb to chew, stating that it will help ease his pain. Consuming the herb, he complains about it being very bitter, but Linda states that it is not the time for jokes, asking him not to move. After that, she begins stitching the wound, inquiring if it hurts, but he claims the pain is bearable. Concerned, she asks if he fought in a large battle again, but he lies, saying he got hurt during training. Hearing that, she asks if there is something he is hiding. However, after not getting a response, she apologizes, stating that she was just concerned for his well-being. However, Hyun-sung states that it is not the same and thinks that if he were stronger, he would not have gotten hurt. After a while, Linda states that she is done with stitching, making him feel much better, and begins tying up the wound while advising him to avoid heavy movements for a while. After some thought, he turns to Linda, asking if the person he is now is better than his past self before the memory loss, but she doesn't grasp his meaning. So he simply asks her to compare his former self to his present self. In response, she asks if he wants to know which one among the sick lord and the current lord is better, and he agrees. Hearing that, she states that she likes the current lord more, causing him to feel glad. Changing the topic, he inquires how Kane is, asking if he will be able to decipher the dungeon book. Agreeing, Linda states that his skills are far beyond what they expected, calling him a linguistic genius. Linda states that it is only a matter of time before the translation finishes. Hearing that, Hyun-sung inquires if there is a higher probability of making the healing potion in that case, causing her to feel nervous. Seeing her expressions, Hyun-sung tells her not to be so pressured, stating that it is okay if they make some mistakes. He advises her to take it as studying and avoid being too consumed in making it, stating that it will surely yield better results. Hearing that, Linda states that she will do her best, and Hyun-sung wears his cape again, stating that he will be leaving. Hearing that, Linda advises him to rest properly, asking if they should postpone their tutoring sessions. However, when she does not get a response, she turns back to find the room empty with a beautiful shell placed on the rack. Wondering if he left it, Linda holds it up, finding it to be very pretty. The next morning in the city, Nose meets Tommen and states that he has heard about him moving out. In response, Tommen agrees, stating that he is moving out that day. Hearing that, Nose remarks that it is too bad, stating that he spent a lot of money renovating his house. This causes Tommen to inquire how someone can change so drastically like that, stating that Nose is sticking to the Lord like a traitor and pretending to regret all of his past actions. In response, Nose states that it is the duty of a servant to accept that they have wronged their Lord. Ascending the stairs, Nose asks if Tommen is aware of the biggest difference between himself and Tommen, and he inquires what it is. In response, Nose states that he comes from a family of knights who have served the Alberan family for hundreds of years, but Tommen does not. However, Tommen does not seem to care about it, stating that the Knights of the Alberan family have been disbanded for a lot of years. No states that it is the reason why his bloodline is important, revealing that the treatment of the Lord and his property could be different like this. Enraged, Tommen states that after accepting his money all these years and turning a blind eye to the Lord, how can he decide to change in a time of need? In response, No states that he is only a human and he disliked the weak and short-sighted Lord. But after the Lord changed, he has also changed, which is quite logical. Hearing that, Tommen calls him an opportunist, stating that he himself is better because at least he has some resolve. Just like that, they continue to blame each other until they reach the office of the Lord. Standing at the door, Rondo tells them that the Lord is waiting for them, and they enter the room. Reaching Haeun Sung, they warmly greet him, in response to which he scolds them for being late, for which they apologize. Haeun Sung states that he has called upon them to discuss a particular village that he points out on the map. He reveals that the village was ambushed by a slave driver named Crom the previous night, leaving them both shocked. Haeun Sung states that Crom was caught and all his men were killed, but the damage is too great. Therefore, he wants them to figure out the scope of damage in the village and come up with the appropriate measures of aid. Curious, Tommen asks how the Lord came to know about this incident. In response, Haeun Sung asks if he is doubting his words. Becoming nervous, Tommen states that it is not the case, and he just wanted to know more details since the topic was important. In response, Haeun Sung states that this news was given to him by his shadow, who acts upon his orders. He reveals that the person who captured Crom and killed his subordinate was also his shadow. Hearing about that, Tommen feels surprised as well as frustrated, considering that someone this strong is by the Lord's side. Meanwhile, Haeun Sung continues to state that there will soon be a word from the southern state, but he is letting them know so that they can be prepared and comply. Turning to Tommen, Haeun Sung tells him that there is a ship docked near the sea that the slave driver and his men used and instructs him to sell it to support the village. He tells Tommen to sell it at the highest possible price while warning him against stealing from him again, making Tommen feel pressured. Haeun Sung states that it is shameful for them if incidents like slave trafficking and thefts keep occurring in their territory and shares his view of increasing troop numbers again. Hearing that, Tommen begins to argue about the finances, but Haeun Sung tells him to keep silent. He says that the former lord decreased the number of soldiers because it was appropriate at the time. However, he thinks the situation was different in his time, considering the thieves and slave drivers spread everywhere. He also considers that they might be involved in a civil war due to problems with the succession to the throne. So he states that any finances required to increase the soldiers will be funded by the money Tommen owes him, telling him to prepare everything without delay, and he agrees. Turning to Nose, Haeun Sung forbids him to send the 20,000 gold coins to Lobelong that they plan to send. He states that every single penny is important to them at a time like this, and they cannot waste money to please the arrogant lords. However, Nose argues that this could provide them with a reason to invade their lands. Stating that the entire nation in chaos due to the succession of the throne, Haeun Sung asks if they will waste their effort to attack them at such a time. Haeun Sung says that if he were the Lord of Lobelong, he would have been preoccupied with making sure that his future was in good hands. Hearing that, Noah states that if this is the decision, then he will follow the order. However, he suggests that the reason for their troops to cross into the Scarlet Canyon should be announced to Lobelong to avoid any future problems, and Haeun Sung allows it. Haeun Sung states that he will discuss the reinforcements for their troops with the captain of the guard in detail, telling them to keep it in mind. After some time, Charlene returns to the castle and tells his comrade to dismiss the troops, saying that he will allow them to stay in the city overnight, and she complies. As he reaches the door of the castle, Rondo welcomes him warmly, while Charlene appreciates him for his job while he was away and asks where the Lord is. In response, Rondo reveals that the Lord is in the underground training center, leaving him surprised. Rondo says that the Lord has changed a lot, telling him not to be too shocked after meeting him. Meanwhile, in the underground training center, Haeun Sung continues his tough training, showing a lot of improvement in his swordsmanship. Looking at his moves, Blanzor states that his force is stabilized quite a bit, and he appreciates him for that. Just then, he hears someone's footsteps and turns around to see Charlene coming towards him. While he looks at him, Blanzor tells him to be careful, introducing him as Charlane and stating that he is the one who assassinated Ian's father. Meanwhile, Charlane comes near him, and they both exchange a silent gaze. Afterward, Charlane bows down to pay his respects and announces his return from duty. Taking a deep breath, Hyun-sung expresses his appreciation for Charlane's performance and mentions that he is eagerly awaiting his return. Charlane reveals that he crossed the border of Lobelong during his duty and asks for punishment. Hyun-sung reassures him that he is already aware of the situation, and instead of punishing him, he will provide a reward. He urges Charlane to stand up and warmly acknowledges the protection he has provided to their lands. Hyun-sung also thanks Charlane for staying by his side after his father's death, to which Charlane humbly replies that he merely protected the castle. Hyun-sung encourages him not to be modest, stating that he has heard about Charlane's achievements. He proposes discussing the future of the territory with Charlane the next day. Recognizing that Charlane must be tired, Hyun-sung advises him to rest, and Charlane quietly leaves as Hyun-sung watches him depart. In the Alberengard main building, Charlane stands in his office, removing his armor, when Harmond, in charge of the soldiers, enters. Bowing down in front of Charlane, Harmond shares his happiness at his safe return. In response, Charlane appreciates Harmond for handling things while he was away. Pouring the drink into his glass, Charlane remarks that the Lord has changed a lot, to which Harmond agrees with, saying that they were also shocked in the beginning. Harmond reveals that his behavior, language, and way of treating people have all changed. Hearing that, Charlane asks Harmond to explain what exactly happened after the Lord regained consciousness. Meanwhile, in the castle, Hyun-sung seeks Blanzor's opinion about Charlane. Hyun-sung states that Charlane does not seem like a bad human and inquires if he is really the person who murdered the previous lord. In response, Blanzor states that this is what she witnessed, and it cannot change no matter what. Thinking that he cannot directly ask him for the reason, Hyun-sung wonders how to deal with it. Blanzor states that when she was with the emperor, she saw countless heroes and traitors and emphasizes that all humans are two-faced. She asserts that the most important factor in this situation is how Hyun-sung will take care of the captain of the guard. Hearing that, Hyun-sung states that there is no one who can replace him at the moment, and all the troops have great faith in him. He also says that the previous lord is not his real father, so he does not need to take revenge on his behalf. Therefore, he considers it better to utilize whatever he can that holds value. Blanzor agrees to that, but also cautions Hyun-sung about the possibility of Charlane trying to harm him, just as he did to the previous lord, leaving him shocked. Meanwhile, in Charlane's office, Harmond provides a detailed account of events after the lord woke up. Charlane inquires about the financier's decision to lower taxes, but Harmond states that he has no information about it. He then asks about the shadow that saved the village from the slave drivers, and Harmond states that the lord has not told anything else about it, asking if Charlane knows anything. However, Charlane states that he does not know about anything, in response to which Harmond shares his belief that the Lord holds secrets they are not aware of. This is verified by the fact that the Lord possesses a secret shadow and an information system of which they are not aware. Harmond states that he noticed numerous drastic changes in the Lord's personality and recalls being surprised on many occasions upon encountering the Lord. Upon hearing this, Charlane remembers his meeting with the Lord and suggests that it would be better to say that the Lord is a different person rather than claiming that he has changed. Shocked by this statement, Harmond asks for clarification, and Charlane reiterates that the Lord is, in fact, a different person. However, Harmond argues that even if the Lord had a twin, they would not share the same appearance, down to every detail on their bodies. Hearing that, Charlane tells him not to take it so seriously, stating that he is just happy to see the Lord healthy again. Afterward, Charlane instructs Harmond to leave, and he complies. Once Harmond is gone, Charlane places the glass down on the table and begins to contemplate something. After some time, a violent wind blows outside a church, causing one of the bells hanging on a tree to fall inside. After a while, a girl picks up the fallen bell and examines it when she suddenly hears footsteps. She turns around to find Charlane approaching her. As he nears her, Charlane asks if he can say a prayer. In response, she encourages him to proceed, and he walks towards the altar. Sitting down near the altar, Charlane begins to say the prayer. After silently watching him for a while, the girl asks if he took care of the thieves, and he confirms that he did. She remarks that he must have been bored in the castle all that time and had an enjoyable time wielding his sword while he was away. She inquires if he enjoyed the experience. In response, he walks towards her and gets to the point, asking if there has been no contact. She replies that she has been waiting for it as desperately as he has. Charlene informs her that there have been changes in the castle, and the financier who was funding them will no longer offer any money. Saying that, he hands her a pouch of gold coins, stating that it is the last time he will provide her with money, leaving her feeling disappointed. She mentions the rumors about a lord changing a lot and suggests that Charlene bring him to the church sometime so she can try and recruit him. This angers Charlene, and he glares at her, causing her to request that he not look at her like that. Angrily, Charlene turns away, reminding her of the suffering she caused him the last time they met. After that, he leaves the church and rides away on his horse. In the forest, the soldiers of Overbearing Castle are on their way to bring Crom, the slave driver, as a prisoner to the castle. Commenting on the long journey ahead, they tell him to walk faster. In response, he requests that they give him some shoes, stating that his feet hurt while walking. Hearing that, the soldier calls him arrogant and starts to gallop his horse, dragging Crom along the ground, while he pleads for them to stop, saying he will walk faster. The soldier stops again and tells Crom to walk until his feet wear out, stating that his pain is not their concern. Suddenly, someone attacks the soldier, causing blood to spurt from his body. Shocked, Crom looks up to find his daughter, Tazy, standing above the horse and is overjoyed to see her. Turning to the rest of the soldiers, she states that she will give them a chance to draw their swords. In response, the soldiers draw their swords, ready to fight, while she confidently jumps down from the horse. Meanwhile, in the Lord's office, a meeting is underway between Hyun-sung, Tommen, Nose, and Charlene. During the meeting, Rondo suddenly opens the door and calls out to Hyun-sung, prompting him to ask what the matter is. Rondo reveals that they have received a report about an unidentified woman who appeared and attacked the troops transporting Crom to help him escape. Shocked to hear this, Hyun-sung turns to Charlene and asks if he can recapture Crom. In response, Charlene states that he will send the trackers immediately, but it won't be easy as the place is quite far from there. Hearing that, Hyun-sung feels disappointed, saying that he should have killed Crom at that point and place. Hearing this, Tommen and Nose inquire what he means by that, but he states that he was just talking to himself. Turning to Rondo, Hyun-sung tells him to recover the dead bodies of the soldiers and compensate their families, and he complies. After Rondo leaves, Hyun-sung remarks on the abundance of problems they have, while Nose asks him to continue with the meeting. So they turn to the map again, and Nose reveals that the Western land has been experiencing a serious drought for several years. This has led to conflicts between the two villages located in that region over a water reservoir. Hearing that, Hyun-sung asks if they cannot simply share the reservoir. Nose reveals that the reservoir belongs to one of the villages, and Tommen adds that if both villages start using it, they might run out of water soon. Hyun-sung states that the other village doesn't have any other water supply. However, Tommen argues that because the village with the water reservoir has a basuda mine, they should protect that village. In response, Hyun-sung turns to Nose, asking if he agrees with Tommen's suggestion. Nose states that since they have no idea how long the drought will last in the Western land, they must ensure the protection of the mine. He emphasizes that it is an important village that manages the mines, so it is necessary for him to make a decision. Afterwards, Hyun-sung turns to Charlene, asking for his opinion. In response, Charlene simply tells him to do what he wants, surprising him. While he is contemplating the decision, Tommen says that there are only 2 places that lack water, so it shouldn't be such a huge concern anymore. Hearing that, Hyun-sung tells Tommen to lie down on his stomach, confusing him. After Hyun-sung angrily repeats his order, Tommen complies and lies down. Holding a stick, Hyun-sung begins to hit him for making such a remark, leaving Charlene shocked. After beating him up, Hyun-sung states that they should make sure to concern themselves with the matter, and Tommen agrees. Turning away, Hyun-sung tells Tommen not to even take a sip of water until this issue is resolved. Just then, Nose reveals that at the top of the Panatino mountain is a huge lake formed from the volcanic crater, and if they use water from it, they can overcome the drought. In response, Hyun-sung inquires about how to get water from there, and Nose replies that there are still ancient waterways at the top of the mountain lake. He mentions that the metropolitan cities and kingdom are being supplied with water through these ancient waterways. Nose tells him that in the past, their lands also used these waterways, surprising Hyun-sung. He reveals that in the past, when their land was thriving, the waterways spread like spider webs throughout the land. Hearing that, Hyun-sung inquires why they are not using the waterways at the moment. In response, Nose tells him that about 100 years ago, the waterways were polluted with poison, and the majority of the population of the city died during this incident. Due to the incident's death toll, which claimed the lives of hundreds and thousands of people, all waterways throughout the land were completely shut down. This makes Hyun-sung wonder about the type of incident his people have faced in the past. Nose informs him that if they repair the waterways in the western land and utilize them, they can significantly cut the cost of getting water from the mountain lake. Upon hearing this incredible idea, Hyun-sung expresses his appreciation, and Nose thanks him. However, Nose reveals that there is one problem. The fourth son of the king, Prince Joseph, has been residing in the royal villa by the mountain lake for the past few years. Therefore, in order to use the water from the lake, they would need permission from the prince. Considering that he will have to bow his head only once Hyun-sung agrees to it, he instructs them to schedule their departure to the mountain lake for the next day, and Nose complies while Charlene keeps staring at him in surprise. The following day, Hyun-sung embarks on the journey towards the mountain lake to meet Prince Joseph, accompanied by Charlene and many soldiers. While on their way, Hyun-sung asks Charlene if Prince Joseph came to the royal villa by the mountain lake around the time he became the Lord, and Charlene confirms it. In response, Hyun-sung remarks on how a prince can be away from his palace for 3 whole years, wondering if he had nothing better to do. Charlene reveals that Prince Joseph does not like being involved in royal politics. Hearing this, Hyun-sung asks if he means the succession of the throne by royal politics, and Charlene agrees. Hyun-sung then inquires about the kind of person Prince Joseph is. In response, Charlene reveals that he is wild and rough beyond measure. He states that Joseph's blood flows with lava and infinity, and that he used to cool off by fighting in wars from a very young age. Surprised by this information, Hyun-sung points out that Nose did not mention anything like that. Charlene explains that it is because the prince went there concealing his identity, making Hyun-sung realize that he would have been completely blindsided if went without knowing anything. Hyun-sung shares his view that if the prince is this strong, he could be greedy for the throne, but Charlene states that one cannot become king just because they are able to fight well. Agreeing, Hyun-sung mentions the countless problems in the land, indicating that ruling the entire kingdom would require significant effort. He also fears that it would be a big problem if Prince Joseph refused to let them use the water from the lake. Hyun-sung feels frustrated by the fact that such a terrifying prince chose his land to settle on. With that, they continue walking towards the royal villa and come across cracked land due to the severe drought it has faced. Hyun-sung thinks that raising taxes in such a state must have decreased his appraisal. After covering some distance, they encounter a beautiful view of water, and Hyun-sung asks what it is. Charlene reveals it to be the water reservoir of one of the 2 villages, making Hyun-sung realize that it is the place the 2 villages are fighting over. After that, they cross the bridge and move forward. Looking at the place, Hyun-sung hopes that the villages are sharing the water now, and Charlene states that they must have received his carrier pigeons by then. Just then, Hyun-sung notices a group of people at a distance and asks what they are doing there. Observing that they are holding weapons, Hyun-sung wonders if they are about to start a fight. After a while, Charlene approaches them and instructs them to bow their heads and pay respect to the Lord. Shortly after, Hyun-sung arrives there as well and asks where the village chief is. Just then, one of the people steps forward and introduces himself as Tinto, the chief of one of the villages, and pays his respect. Just after that, another person standing on the opposite side introduces himself as Dinan, the chief of the other village. Hyun-sung then asks if they were fighting amongst each other because of the reservoir, and they agree. Getting down from the horse, Hyun-sung asks if they did not receive the carrier pigeons he sent from the castle, and they tell him that they have received them. Hearing that, Hyun-sung inquires why they are fighting when he has ordered them to share the water reservoir. In response, Dinan states that Tinto is disobeying the orders of the Lord and refusing to share the water with them. Turning to Tinto, Hyun-sung asks if it is true, and he states that he did not refuse them access but only told them to pay for it since they work hard to maintain the reservoir. Turning to Dinan, Hyun-sung asks what they asked for in exchange for using the water, and he reveals that they asked for a specific amount of silver per container of water. Dinan explains that it has been many years since they had a good harvest due to the severe drought, and the situation became even worse after the taxes were raised. In this condition, he says that if the villagers have to pay for even the water to drink, they will have no choice but to leave their homes. However, Tinto argues that if they were to use the water reservoir without any payment, it would dry up in no time. However, Dinan does not consider it to be the truth, stating that they cannot waste water when it is saving their lives. Tinto tells him that their village houses a lot of miners from the Bosyuda mines and requests that he take care of them so that they can live in comfort. Hearing that, Hyun-sung remains silent for a moment and then tells Tinto to lie down on his stomach, confusing him. After a while, Hyun-sung angrily repeats his order again, and Tinto complies. Using his stick, Hyun-sung begins to hit him, asking if they think of gaining an advantage just because of the mines, but Tinto explains that this is not what he meant. Hitting him hard, Hyun-sung states that he sent a direct order to share the reservoir and never told them to sell the water instead of disobeying the Lord and spreading disturbance on his lands. After that, he turns to Dinan and orders him to lie down on his stomach as well. Hitting him with the stick, Hyun-sung states that if Tinto disobeyed the orders, he should have contacted the administrator instead of bringing weapons to fight them. After that, he tells them both to get up and face each other, and they comply. Hyun-sung states that even though they are from different villages, they are all his people and he will not discriminate among them. Therefore, he wants them to find a solution together if there is a shortage of water supply, since he cannot accept their efforts to try and survive on their own. So he orders them to embrace each other, and they comply. After that, he turns to the villagers and orders them all to embrace each other, stating that their enemy is the drought, not the neighboring village. They all comply, embracing each other and apologizing for their actions, while Hyun-sung turns to Tinto, asking if his house is near, and he agrees. Hyun-sung states that he has not eaten yet and asks Tinto to invite him to his house. In response, Tinto states that it would be an honor for him. Turning to Dinan, Hyun-sung tells him to join them as well, and he agrees. After that, Tinto takes them towards his house, while Charlene keeps standing there, surprised at whatever he saw. We really hope that you enjoyed this manhwa. Make sure to like and subscribe for more.